The first time Ilara Voss stood before the throne of Ashborne, she was not brought there as a bride, a noblewoman, or even a prisoner worthy of judgment. She was dragged in with iron around her wrists, ash in her hair, and a bleeding mark on her collarbone where a rebel blade had torn through her skin. The entire royal court had gathered beneath the black banners of the Alpha King, expecting to watch a slave Omega bow, break, and vanish into whatever punishment the council had prepared for her. Instead, the moment King Draven's gloved fingers touched the side of her face, something impossible moved beneath her skin. Black veins spread from her jaw like living roots. Her left eye darkened until no light remained inside it, and from somewhere deep beneath the stone floor, every wolf in the palace began to whimper. No one spoke. Not the nobles in their silver-threaded cloaks, not the royal guards standing with spears crossed before the throne, not Lord Cadron Vale, the oldest voice on the king's council, whose pale fingers tightened around the carved head of his cane, as if he had just seen a ghost from a war everyone had sworn to forget. Ilara could barely breathe. Pain hammered behind her ribs, but she refused to fall. She had learned long ago that slaves who collapsed were not helped. They were stepped over. So she stood there, barefoot on the cold black marble, with blood dripping down her arm, and the Alpha King's hand still hovering beside her face. King Draven Ashborne was not a man who showed fear. His kingdom had been built on that truth. He was the wolf, who had broken 3 rival packs before his 25th winter, the ruler who wore a crown of dark iron because gold was too soft for the throne he had inherited. Men lowered their eyes when he passed. Women whispered prayers when he entered a hall. Even his enemies spoke his name carefully, as if the sound itself could summon teeth from the dark. But now he stared at Ilara, as though she had become the one thing in his kingdom he did not understand. "Remove her chains," he said. The command was quiet, but it struck the hall like thunder. Lord Cadron stepped forward at once. "Your Majesty, she is infected with forbidden magic. She must be contained." Draven did not look away from Ilara. "I gave an order." A guard moved quickly, hands trembling as he unlocked the iron cuffs around her wrists. The metal fell against the marble with a sharp, ugly sound. Ilara's hands remained lifted for a moment, as if her body had forgotten what freedom felt like. Then she lowered them slowly, hiding the raw wounds beneath her sleeves. Freedom was not a thing she trusted, not when it was given in front of witnesses. Only hours before, she had been in the lower kitchens, washing blood from the stone troughs after the failed rebellion. Ashborne Palace still smelled of smoke, steel, and wet fur. The rebels had come through the eastern gate, disguised as grain carriers, then shifted in the courtyard, and tore through the guards before the bells could ring. Ilara had not run because there had been nowhere for her to run to. Slaves belonged to the palace. If the palace burned, they burned with it. She had found the Alpha King half collapsed behind the shattered doors of the war chamber, one hand pressed against his side, black poison spreading beneath his armor. 3 rebels lay dead around him, but a 4th had lifted a silver blade toward his heart. Ilara had not thought. Thinking was for people who owned their lives. She had only grabbed the nearest brazier hook and driven it through the rebel's throat. The king had looked at her then, not with gratitude, but with suspicion. "What are you?" he had asked. Ilara had answered the only truth she had ever been allowed to have. "Nothing, my king." Now, standing before the court, she wished she had let the blade fall, because saving a king did not make a slave beloved. It made her visible, and in Ashborne, visibility was dangerous. Lord Cadron turned toward the gathered nobles. His voice softened into something smooth and poisonous. "Let the court remember what we witnessed. This girl was purchased from the war pens of the southern border. No lineage, no pack oath, no family name recognized by crown or moon. She was brought into this palace as labor, not as blood. And now forbidden darkness answers through her skin." Murmurs rose around the hall. Ilara lowered her eyes, but each word found its mark. Purchased, labor, no lineage, no blood. She had heard worse, but never from so many mouths at once. Never with the Alpha King close enough to hear every breath she failed to steady. Draven finally turned from her. She saved my life. She may have saved your body, Kadrin replied, only to endanger your throne. A cold silence followed. Alara felt the court shift. There it was, the thing they truly feared. Not her pain, not her chains, not even the black veins still fading beneath her skin. They feared what she might mean for power. Draven descended one step from the throne. The shadows of the high windows cut across his face, making him look carved from winter and war. You believe a wounded slave Omega threatens my throne? Kadrin bowed his head, but not deeply enough. I believe old blood hides best in those no one bothers to count. Alara's pulse changed. Old blood. The word slid into her like a key turning inside a locked door. For one breath, she was no longer in the throne hall. She was a child again, curled beneath a broken cart in the slave yards, while an old woman with clouded eyes pressed a thumb to her lips and whispered, "Never bleed beneath moonlight, little shadow. Never let them see what sleeps." Alara had thought the woman mad. Most slaves went mad if they lived long enough. But now, the memory returned with teeth. Draven noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes returned to her, sharp and silver gray, reading the fear she had tried to bury. "What did he say that frightened you?" he asked. Alara's throat tightened. No one had ever asked her what frightened her. They had only told her when to kneel. "Nothing, my king." His gaze hardened, not in anger, but in disbelief. "You lie poorly. I was never taught to lie well." A few nobles laughed softly. It was not a loud sound. It did not need to be. It curled through the hall like smoke and wrapped around every bruise she had taught herself to ignore. Then Lady Seraphine Morcant stepped from beside the council seats, graceful as a blade beneath silk. She was not queen, though half the court behaved as if she already wore the crown. Her family controlled the Western armies. Her beauty was polished, pale, and cruelly calm. For 3 years, rumor had named her the future Luna of Ashborne, though Draven had never confirmed it. Her eyes moved over Alara with delicate disgust. "A slave who speaks sharply before the throne," Seraphine said. "How quickly gratitude becomes arrogance." Alara bowed her head. "Forgive me, my lady," Seraphine smiled. "Forgiveness is for those who know their place." Something inside Alara pulled tight. Not power, not magic. Something older than both. A small, exhausted refusal. She lifted her eyes. "I know my place." The hall quieted again. Seraphine's smile thinned. Alara should have stopped. Every instinct beaten into her bones screamed at her to stop. But the blood loss, the pain, the memory of the old woman's warning, and the king's unreadable stare had loosened something inside her. My place was in the kitchens when rebels entered through a gate guarded by noble soldiers. My place was beside the war chamber when no council lord stood between the assassin and the king. My place was on the floor bleeding after I saved a life worth more than mine. Her voice shook, but it did not break. "So yes, my lady, I know my place. It is wherever others leave their duty undone." A sound moved through the court, not approval, not yet, but shock. Seraphine went still. Lord Kadrin's expression darkened, and King Draven looked at Alara as if, for the first time, he was not seeing chains, blood, or rank. He was seeing her. That was when the pain struck again. It began beneath her collarbone, where the rebel blade had cut her. A burning line crawled under her skin, spreading toward her throat. Alara staggered, one hand flying to the wound. The torches along the walls guttered low. Somewhere outside, beyond the palace walls, a wolf howled once, then fell silent, as if a hand had closed around its throat. Draven moved before anyone else did. He caught her by the arm. The contact should have steadied her. Instead, it broke something open. A vision flashed through her mind. A battlefield drowned in black snow, wolves with burning eyes, a woman crowned in bone standing beneath a dead moon, and a monstrous shadow larger than any wolf lowering its head before a girl covered in blood. Alara gasped and tried to pull away. Draven's grip tightened. "What did you see?" She stared at him, horrified, because in that vision, He had been there too, not as king, as a beast chained in silver, his fur dark with blood, his eyes full of a pain so savage it no longer looked human. "I saw nothing," she whispered. This time, he knew she was lying. Before he could speak, Lord Cadron raised his cane and struck it once against the marble. "Enough. The court requires protection. By ancient law, any unclaimed Omega carrying unknown magic must be bound to royal custody until her blood is examined." Ilara's stomach dropped. Royal custody was a pretty phrase for a cage. Draven's jaw tightened. "She is already under my protection." Cadron's eyes sharpened. "Then name the form of that protection, Your Majesty. Before the court, before the law, before the moon." The trap revealed itself slowly. If Draven claimed her as servant, the council could take her for examination. If he named her prisoner, they could chain her in the temple cells. If he dismissed her, Seraphine and Cadron would make certain she vanished before dawn. Ilara saw the answer in the faces around her before Draven spoke. She saw the hunger, the fear, the political calculation. The king had saved her from chains only to find chains waiting in another shape. Draven looked at the council, then at Seraphine, then at Ilara. For a heartbeat, something like regret moved across his face. Then the Alpha King of Ashborne said the words that changed the kingdom forever. "She will stand under my name." Cadron's face went pale. "Your Majesty." Draven's voice cut through him. "By blood debt, by royal law, and by the witness of this court, the Omega who saved my life will be raised from bondage and placed under the protection of my house." Seraphine stepped forward, her calm finally cracking. "As what?" The hall held its breath. Draven released Ilara's arm, but the warmth of his hand remained like a brand. His eyes did not soften. His voice did not tremble. "As my Luna." Ilara forgot how to breathe. The court erupted. Nobles shouted. Councilmen rose from their seats. Seraphine stared as if he had struck her. Lord Cadron's cane trembled once against the marble. But Ilara heard none of it clearly. "My Luna." The words did not feel like rescue. They felt like a sentence. Because no Alpha King made a slave Omega Luna out of kindness. Kings did not spend power without purpose. Draven had not chosen her from love, desire, or fate. He had chosen her because the court had cornered him, and she had become the only move left on the board. Still, as the court roared around them, he leaned close enough that only she could hear him. "Do not mistake this for mercy," he said quietly. Ilara lifted her eyes to his. "I won't," she whispered. His gaze flickered, almost approving. "Good," he said. "Mercy gets people killed here." And beneath the marble floor, far below the throne room, something ancient opened its eyes. The bells of Ashborne rang before dawn, not the morning bells reserved for funerals, nor the iron alarms that warned of invasion. These bells were slower, heavier, royal declaration bells. Every strike rolled through the mountain kingdom like a command carved into stone. A new Luna had been named, and the entire palace hated her for it. Ilara stood alone in the eastern chamber, while servant women tightened silver clasps around a black ceremonial gown she had never asked to wear. The fabric was too fine against her scarred skin. She could still smell the smoke from the slave quarters on her hair, no matter how many scented oils they brushed through it. One maid refused to touch her directly, using gloves as if Ilara carried disease. Another whispered prayers beneath her breath each time the black veins briefly surfaced beneath Ilara's throat. No one congratulated her. No one met her eyes. The chamber itself had once belonged to a queen. Moon-shaped lanterns glowed softly against dark stone walls carved with ancient wolves. Heavy curtains of silver velvet framed tall windows overlooking the frozen cliffs below Ashborne Palace. It should have felt beautiful. Instead, it felt like being buried alive in silk. A collar of polished obsidian rested atop the table near the mirror. Luna's iron. The symbol of royal mating before the final moon ceremony bound two souls permanently. Ilara stared at it too long. One of the maids noticed and lowered her voice. "You should be grateful." Ilara almost laughed. Grateful. The same kingdom that had sold her between owners like livestock now expected gratitude because they placed prettier chains around her throat. She turned toward the mirror instead. For a moment she barely recognized herself. Her face looked sharper, cleaned of soot and blood. The dark gown made her pale skin seem almost ghost-like beneath the candlelight. But her eyes remained the same gray with faint silver near the center. Strange eyes that had unsettled people since childhood, because wolves rarely trusted what they could not read. Then she noticed it again. A thin, black line moving beneath the skin near her collarbone. It vanished before she could touch it. The chamber door opened. Every maid dropped into bows instantly. King Draven entered without announcement. The room changed when he stepped inside. It always did. Not because he was loud, he rarely raised his voice, but because danger followed him like winter air. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark military leathers instead of royal robes, he looked less like a king returning from court and more like a warlord arriving to finish a battle. His silver-gray eyes moved once across the room before settling on Ilara. "Leave us." The maids fled immediately. Silence settled after the door shut. Ilara kept her gaze lowered. "My king, you may stop saying that when we are alone." She looked up carefully. "What should I call you instead?" His mouth almost curved. Almost. Draven. The name felt dangerous in her throat. She did not say it. He walked toward the window instead, gloved hands behind his back. Snow drifted beyond the glass in slow spirals beneath the mountain wind. "The court is demanding your blood examination," he said. Ilara stiffened. "Will you allow it?" "No." The answer came too quickly. That unsettled her more than hesitation would have. Draven studied the storm outside. "Kydron is pushing harder than expected. Half the council believes you carry forbidden blood. And the other half? They think you seduced me." Ilara stared at him. To her horror, a low sound escaped him. Not laughter exactly. Something rougher, darker. As though amusement had become unfamiliar to him long ago. "You look offended," he observed. "I look confused. As you should." His honesty struck harder than cruelty would have. Draven finally turned toward her fully. "You want the truth? I did not make you Luna to save you." "I know." Something unreadable crossed his face again. "Most people in your position would pretend otherwise. I spent my life around powerful men," Ilara said quietly. "None of them ever gave anything freely." For the first time since entering the room, he looked directly at her scars. Not with pity, with recognition. And suddenly Ilara understood there were wounds on this man no one spoke about. Draven stepped closer. "The council wanted control of you before they understood what you are. What if I don't know what I am?" His gaze dropped briefly toward the faint mark beneath her collarbone. "I don't think that matters anymore." A cold silence followed. Ilara forced herself to ask the question burning through her mind. "Why did the wolves react to me in the throne hall?" Draven's expression hardened instantly. "Interesting. Not surprise. Not confusion. Recognition. You heard them?" he asked. "Heard what?" The silence. A chill crawled over her skin. Before she could answer, a sharp knock struck the chamber doors. "Enter," Draven said. Captain Ronan Vale stepped inside. Unlike the jeweled nobles poisoning the court with whispers, Ronan looked born for war rather than politics. Tall and broad like his king, with a scar crossing his jaw and dark armor dusted in snow, he carried himself like a wolf that trusted violence more than words. But the moment his eyes landed on Ilara, something shifted. Not disgust, not fear. Instinct. His wolf recognized something before his mind did. He masked it quickly and bowed. "Your Majesty, the Western delegates have arrived." Draven's jaw tightened. "Already?" They rode through the night. Of course they had. News of a slave Omega becoming Luna would spread through rival kingdoms like blood through water. Ronan hesitated before speaking again. "There is another matter." "What?" "The hounds beneath the lower prison killed each other." Silence. Ilara frowned slightly. "What hounds?" Neither man answered immediately, which meant they did not want her hearing the truth. Draven finally spoke. War-wolves? That was worse. War-wolves were not ordinary beasts. They were bred from ancient bloodlines for brutality alone. Massive creatures used in border wars before the southern kingdoms outlawed them generations ago. Ashborne still kept some in the underground kennels beneath the palace. Ilara swallowed. Why would they kill each other? Ronan looked at her carefully. According to the handlers, they started howling after the court session yesterday. Then they turned on one another trying to reach the surface. Her stomach twisted. Draven noticed immediately. You think this is connected to you? It was not a question. Ilara looked away. I don't know what's happening to me. Ronan's expression softened slightly, though caution remained beneath it. With respect, my lady. Neither do we. Lady. The word sounded strange, coming from anyone. Draven moved toward the door. Double the palace guard tonight. No one enters the eastern wing without my permission. Ronan bowed once. Then his gaze flicked toward Ilara again, lingering briefly near her throat, where the black veins had vanished. He left without another word. The moment the doors closed, Ilara spoke quietly. He's afraid of me. No, Draven said. She looked at him. He's afraid of what fear might make the court do to you. That answer unsettled her more, because it meant at least one person besides the king believed she was worth protecting. Draven stepped toward the ceremonial collar resting on the table. The obsidian glimmered beneath candlelight. The moon-binding ceremony will happen in 3 nights. Ilara's pulse stumbled. So soon? The court wants legitimacy before rumors spread further. They already have. Yes, he said darkly. They do. He picked up the collar carefully, then paused. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly before he removed his gloves. Ilara froze. No one removed gloves casually in winter courts, not unless they trusted the person standing near them, or unless they wanted to prove something. His bare hands were scarred, not battle scars. Burn scars. Silver marks crossed his palms and wrists like something had once melted through his skin. Ilara stared before she could stop herself. Draven noticed. The last woman I touched during a moonbond died screaming, he said flatly. The room went cold. Ilara lifted her eyes slowly. There it was. The hidden wound. Not rumor. Not court gossip. Truth. A curse, she whispered. His silence answered enough. She was never meant to survive it, he said after a long moment. But no one told me until it was too late. Ilara's chest tightened unexpectedly. Not because he was dangerous. Because, beneath all that power, he sounded guilty. Deeply guilty. And guilt was not something monsters carried easily. Then why risk another bond? She asked. Draven's gaze settled on her with frightening intensity. Because when I touched you yesterday, the curse did not react. The world seemed to still. Ilara stared at him. What does that mean? I don't know yet. Honesty again. Always sharp. Always dangerous. He reached toward her slowly, giving her time to pull away. She should have. Every instinct told her not to let powerful men close enough to ruin her. But something inside her, the same strange pull she felt in the throne hall, held her still. His fingers brushed lightly against her wrist. Varm. Nothing happened. No burning skin. No dark magic. But beneath Ilara's ribs, something massive stirred. A low growl echoed through her mind. Not heard with ears. Felt. Her breath caught violently. Draven's eyes narrowed instantly. What was that? She stumbled backward. I don't know. But she did know one thing. Whatever lived inside her had awakened the moment he touched her. And somewhere deep beneath Ashborne Palace, the werewolves began screaming again. The screaming beneath the palace did not stop. It rolled upward through the stone foundations like distant thunder, faint enough that most nobles pretended not to hear it, but sharp enough that every wolf-blooded soul inside Ashborne felt their instincts turn restless. Servants crossed hallways faster. Guards tightened hands around spear shafts. The horses in the royal stables kicked against their gates until 2 stable boys were trampled before sunrise. And still the werewolves screamed. Ilara did not sleep. She sat beside the narrow fire in her chamber long after Draven left, staring at her hands while snow battered the palace windows. Every few moments, she expected the black veins to return, expected claws to burst through her fingers, expected to become something monstrous, and finally prove the court right. But nothing happened. Only that growl remained. Low, distant, alive. Not outside her. Inside. By dawn, exhaustion had settled deep into her bones, but the eastern wing had already awakened. She could hear servants preparing for the western delegates arriving from the rival mountain packs. Ashbourne's enemies would smile at royal tables tonight, while quietly measuring weakness behind every glance. And now, their king had chained himself politically to a slave Omega, carrying unknown magic. Ilara wrapped a dark cloak around herself and slipped from the chamber before the maids arrived. No guard stopped her. That disturbed her more than imprisonment would have. The palace corridors stretched endlessly beneath silver torchlight. Ancient wolf banners hung from high stone arches blackened by centuries of smoke and war. Ashborne was not built like southern courts designed for beauty. It was built like a fortress prepared to survive the end of the world. And beneath all that stone, something inhuman waited. Ilara could feel it. Not the war wolves. Something older. The deeper she walked into the silent halls, the colder the air became. Strange whispers brushed the edges of her hearing. Not voices exactly, more like memory trapped inside the walls. A sharp scent suddenly stopped her. Blood. Fresh. Ilara followed it instinctively, down a narrow servant's stairwell, until she reached a heavy iron gate partially left open. Beyond it stretched the lower kennels beneath the palace. Torchlight flickered weakly against wet stone, and every sound had stopped. No growling, no chains, nothing. Ilara stepped carefully inside. The smell hit her first. Blood, fur, death. Bodies lay scattered across the kennel floor. Massive werewolves with broken jaws and torn throats sprawled beside shattered iron cages. One had nearly ripped its own claws off trying to dig through solid stone. But none of them had died fighting humans. They had been trying to escape. A quiet sound came from the darkness ahead. Whimpering. Ilara moved toward it before caution could stop her. One wolf still lived, smaller than the others. Young. Its black fur was soaked with blood from deep wounds across its side. Silver chains wrapped around its neck, cutting into flesh. The creature bared its teeth weakly as she approached, then suddenly stopped. Its pale eyes widened. Not in aggression. Recognition. Ilara's pulse quickened. The wolf lowered itself slowly onto the stone floor. Submission. No, she whispered. The creature whimpered once and pressed its bleeding muzzle against her hand. The moment skin touched fur, pain exploded through her skull. Visions crashed into her mind violently. Snowfields drenched in blood. A giant wolf made of living shadow tearing through armies. Silver chains wrapped around screaming creatures beneath a dead moon. And a voice. Deep. All-scient. Male. Find the air. Ilara gasped and stumbled backward. The young wolf cried sharply. Footsteps thundered behind her. Ilara. Draven. He reached her in seconds. Ronan close behind him, with soldiers flooding the kennel entrance. The moment the guards saw the dead wolves, panic spread instantly. The moon protect us. They slaughtered each other. No, Ronan muttered darkly, studying the claw marks carved into the floor. They were trying to flee. Draven's gaze landed on the surviving wolf kneeling before Ilara, then on Ilara herself. What did you do? She shook her head rapidly. Nothing. But even she no longer believed that. The wounded wolf crawled closer to her feet, despite its injuries. A guard raised his spear immediately. My king, stand back, the wolf snarled. Every torch in the kennel flickered black for one heartbeat. Darkness swept through the room like a living breath, and every soldier froze. Because behind Ilara, something moved. Not physically, something enormous. A shape made of shadow and teeth towering against the walls for the briefest instant before vanishing again. The surviving wolf immediately lowered its head to the ground. Ronan stepped backward slowly, face pale beneath his battle scars. Draven did not move. But Ilara saw it. Fear. Real fear. Not of her. Of recognition. He had seen something like this before. The torches reignited. Silence crashed through the kennels. No one breathed. Finally, Draven spoke quietly. "Everyone out." "My king," Ronan began. "Now." The soldiers obeyed instantly. Even Ronan hesitated only a second before retreating, though his eyes lingered on Ilara with troubled uncertainty. Soon only the king, the wounded wolf, and Ilara remained among the dead. Draven stared at her for a long moment. Then he asked the question no one else dared to ask. "What are you hiding?" Ilara almost laughed from exhaustion. "As soon as I know, I'll tell you." His jaw tightened. "You touched it." "Yes." "And?" She hesitated, because the voice still echoed inside her skull. "Find the air." Draven noticed the hesitation. Immediately. "Ilara." She looked at him. For the first time since entering Ashborne Palace, she saw something beneath his control crack slightly. Not anger. Desperation. And suddenly she understood something terrifying. The Alpha King was not merely curious about her power. He was afraid of what would happen if she lost control. "I saw a battlefield," she whispered, "and a wolf made of shadows." His expression darkened instantly. That reaction answered more than words. "You know what it is." "No," he said too quickly. "Lee." Ilara stepped closer despite herself. "Then why are you afraid?" Draven went still. No one probably asked him questions this directly. No one survived doing it. But Ilara was too exhausted and frightened to fear consequences properly anymore. His voice lowered. "Because there are stories older than this kingdom." A cold chill moved through the kennel. "When I was a child," he continued carefully, "my father took me beneath the old moon archives. There were carvings sealed behind silver doors, creatures the first alphas hunted during the Blood Wars." Ilara's stomach tightened. "Monsters?" "No," Draven said grimly. "Weapons." The surviving wolf whimpered softly at her feet. Draven looked toward it. The shadow wolf nearly destroyed the northern kingdoms 400 years ago. Entire packs vanished overnight. Villages were found emptied except for blood and claw marks. Ilara swallowed hard. "And what killed it?" His eyes lifted to hers. "Nothing ever did." Silence. Only the crackling torches and distant winter wind beyond the palace walls. "The first king sealed it away," Draven said. "Or so history claims." Ilara's breathing became uneven, because deep inside her chest, that ancient growl answered his words. Not with anger. With hunger. She backed away instinctively. "No." Draven stepped forward immediately. "Ilara, what if it's inside me?" The question finally entered the world aloud, and once spoken, neither of them could escape it. Draven's face hardened into kingly control again, but too late. She had seen the truth in his eyes already. He thought it possible. Ilara pressed trembling hands against her mouth. "Slave. Omega. No bloodline. No scent. Sold between kingdoms because wolves always became uneasy around her. The old woman's warning, never bleed beneath moonlight." Her entire life suddenly rearranged itself into something monstrous. "I need air," she whispered. "Ilara." She turned and fled before he could stop her, up through the palace corridors, past startled servants, past guards who lowered their eyes now instead of shoving her aside. She barely noticed where she ran until freezing wind struck her face. The outer battlements. Snow whipped violently across the cliffs surrounding Ashborne Palace. Far below, dark pine forests stretched endlessly beneath storm clouds. Ilara gripped the stone railing hard enough to hurt. "Breathe. Just breathe." But the growl inside her chest kept getting louder. A memory surfaced suddenly. Not her own. Silver chains. Screaming. Fire. A beast tearing itself apart trying to reach someone crying in the dark. Ilara collapsed to her knees with a gasp. Footsteps approached slowly behind her. She expected Draven. Instead, Lady Seraphine's voice slid through the storm like silk over a knife. "So it's true." Ilara looked up sharply. Seraphine stood beneath the snowfall in pale silver furs, beautiful and perfectly composed as always. Only her eyes betrayed her. Hatred, not petty jealousy. Fear sharpened into cruelty. "You should not be here," Ilara said weakly. "And yet here I am." Seraphine stepped closer carefully. "Do you know what the court whispers now? They think the king brought a cursed creature into his own palace." Ilara turned away. "I didn't ask for this." "No," Seraphine agreed softly. "That's what makes you dangerous." The wind howled between them. Seraphine studied her quietly for a moment. "Do you know why Draven truly chose you?" Ilara said nothing. "Because he's dying." Her head snapped upward. Seraphine smiled faintly. "There it is. He didn't tell you." She stepped closer. "The royal bloodline is failing. His wolf is turning feral. The curse inside him worsens every moon cycle. The council believes a mate bond might stabilize him long enough to secure the throne." Ilara's stomach dropped. No, that couldn't be. Except suddenly his scars made sense. The gloves, the fear of touch, the exhaustion hidden behind his eyes. Seraphine's voice lowered almost sympathetically. "You are not his Luna, slave girl." Her pale gaze sharpened. "You are his last experiment." The words struck harder than they should have, because some broken part of Ilara had started hoping otherwise. Seraphine leaned close enough for her whisper to disappear into the snowstorm. "And when the court realizes what lives inside you," she murmured, "they will burn you alive before the next moon rises." Then she walked away, leaving Ilara alone on the battlements with winter wind, a monster beneath her skin, and the terrifying realization that she no longer knew whether the king feared her or needed her. The storm swallowed the palace by nightfall. Snow crashed against the black towers of Ashborne in violent waves, burying the mountain paths and silencing the outer villages beneath sheets of white. Torches along the battlements bent under the wind like dying stars. Inside the palace, servants whispered that the old gods were angry. Wolves refused to settle. 3 guards claimed they heard growling beneath the walls even where no kennels existed. And somewhere inside Ilara, the thing beneath her skin listened. She sat alone beside the fire, long after Seraphine's words should have faded. "You are his last experiment." The sentence circled endlessly through her thoughts. Draven was dying. No worse. His wolf was. Among wolf-blooded kingdoms, the wolf was not simply power. It was instinct, soul, blood, memory. Wolves could rage, grieve, hunger, even turn violent after battle, but they were never supposed to decay. A dying wolf meant something unnatural, something cursed, which meant Draven had not claimed her merely to outmaneuver the court. He had claimed her because he was running out of time. The realization should have angered her. Instead, it frightened her, because despite everything, she remembered the look in his eyes when he thought she might collapse in the kennels. She remembered the restraint in his hands whenever he touched her, the exhaustion hidden beneath the king's control. He was dangerous, but perhaps he was also drowning. A knock struck the chamber door. Ilara stiffened immediately. "Enter." Ronan stepped inside. He removed his gloves slowly, snow melting across the shoulders of his dark armor. Unlike the nobles, he did not look uncomfortable in her presence anymore. Careful, yes, alert, but no longer disgusted. "My lady," he said. The title still sounded wrong. "What is it?" "The king requests your presence." Of course he did. Ilara stood slowly, exhaustion dragging at her limbs. "Am I under guard now?" Ronan's jaw tightened faintly. No, that wasn't an answer. A shadow of reluctant respect crossed his face. "No," he admitted. It wasn't. He waited while she wrapped herself in a dark cloak. As they walked through the palace corridors, Ilara noticed the shift in how people looked at her now. Not contempt. Fear. Servants lowered their eyes instantly. Guards stepped aside too quickly. 2 noble women crossed themselves with moon signs when she passed. The change unsettled her more than hatred ever had. At least hatred was honest. They descended deeper into the palace than she had gone before. Past the royal halls, past the council chambers, down narrow, torch-lit stairways carved directly into the mountain itself. The air grew colder. Olda, what is this place? Ilara asked quietly. Ronan hesitated. The lower archives. That made her pulse quicken. Ancien record, ancien secret. Draven stood waiting before a pair of enormous silver doors, carved with wolves tearing at shadowed beasts. Torches burned blue beside him. He had removed his royal coat, leaving only black leathers and the sword strapped across his back. He looked less like a king here, more like a guardian, standing before a tomb. Ronan bowed once, and withdrew without another word. The moment they were alone, silence thickened between them. Draven studied Ilara carefully. You left the kennels abruptly. You think? His expression darkened slightly. Seraphine spoke to you. Not a question. Ilara folded her arms tightly beneath the cloak. She told me your wolf is dying. A muscle shifted sharply in his jaw. So that is how the court moves now, he said coldly. Through whispers. She wasn't lying. No. The honesty stunned her again. Draven stepped toward the silver doors. Come. The metal groaned as he pushed them open. Cold air rushed outward, carrying the scent of dust, old parchment, and something faintly metallic beneath it. Blood. The lower archives stretched endlessly beneath the mountain. Shelves of ancient texts towered toward darkness above. Stone statues of long-dead Alpha Kings lined the chamber walls, their carved eyes seeming to watch every movement below. At the center of the room stood a circular table covered in maps, scrolls, and old bones marked with moon symbols. Ilara slowed. Something was wrong here. Not visibly. Instinctively. The darkness beneath her skin stirred uneasily. Draven noticed at once. You feel it? Yes. His voice lowered. This place was built before Ashborne existed. The first northern kings sealed dangerous things beneath these mountains. Ilara's stomach tightened. Including the Shadow Wolf? He did not answer immediately. That was answer enough. Draven moved toward one of the stone shelves and pulled free a massive leather-bound text. Dust scattered into the torchlight. This kingdom remembers history selectively, he said quietly. Victors always do. He opened the book carefully. The pages were filled with ancient sketches stained dark with age. Ilara stepped closer. Her breath caught instantly. A creature towered across the parchment. Massive, wolf-shaped, formed from darkness itself with pale eyes burning from within black fur. Entire armies were drawn fleeing before it. Below the image were words carved in old lunar script. Draven Sak translated them softly. The beast that devours betrayal. Cold flooded Ilara's body, because the growl inside her chest answered the words immediately. Draven looked at her sharply. What happened? She pressed a hand against her ribs. It reacted. His eyes darkened. Ilara. The Shadow Wolf was never believed to be a creature born naturally. The old stories claim it attached itself to bloodlines touched by extreme grief, betrayal, and violence. A terrible thought formed slowly. You think someone carried it before me? I think, he said carefully, that someone imprisoned it inside a bloodline. Silence crashed between them. Ilara stared at the monstrous drawing again. Slave Omega. No scent. No known family. What if she had never been abandoned? What if she had been hidden? Draven turned another page. This sketch showed a woman standing before kneeling wolves, black veins spreading across her throat while shadow curled behind her like living wings. Ilara's blood turned cold. The woman looked like her. Not identical, but close enough to feel like looking through time into a nightmare. Beneath the image was one sentence. The queen who loved too deeply became the beast. Ilara stepped backward instinctively. No. Draven closed the book sharply. I didn't bring you here to frighten you. Then why bring me at all? His silver-gray eyes held hers steadily. Because the court is preparing to move against you. The truth landed heavily. Eliminate me, she whispered, if necessary. And you? A dangerous silence followed. Finally he said, I haven't decided yet. The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt strangely honest. Draven walked toward the circular table, tension visible beneath his controlled movements. Kadrin believes you may trigger an old prophecy tied to the northern bloodlines. Do you believe him? No. Too quick again. Lee. Alara studied him carefully. What aren't you telling me? His expression closed instantly. Then, pain hit him. Violently. Draven staggered against the stone table with a sharp inhale. His hand clenched hard enough to crack the wood beneath his fingers. Alara moved without thinking. Draven. Stay back. Too late. She caught his arm. The moment skin touched skin. Darkness exploded through the archive chamber. Every torch extinguished at once. A monstrous growl tore through the room, not from Draven. From her. Alara screamed and fell backward as black veins surged violently across her arms. The stone floor beneath her cracked. Shadow burst outward across the chamber walls like living smoke, and for one horrifying instant, she saw through someone else's eyes. Silver chains. Blood. A king kneeling before a woman crying black tears. Then claws ripping through flesh. The vision shattered. Torchlight reignited violently. Alara lay gasping on the floor. Draven stood several feet away, breathing hard. His eyes no longer fully human. Wolf eyes. Bright silver. Feral. His hands trembled. Not from fear. From restraint. Alara, he said roughly. Look at me. She did. And realized, with sudden terror, the veins across his wrists were blackening too. The curse inside him had reacted to her. No. Not reacted. Answered. Draven forced himself upright slowly, though pain sharpened every movement. Now you understand why the court fears this. Ilara's breathing shook. You said your curse never reacted to me before. It didn't. Then what changed? His silence stretched too long. Then finally, the bond. Herpul stopped. No. No. The Luna claim, Draven said darkly. The moment I named you before the throne, the blood laws recognized you. The room suddenly felt too small, too cold. What happens now? She whispered. Draven stared at her with exhausted honesty. I don't know. And that terrified her more than any monster ever could, because kings were supposed to have answers. But the Alpha King of Ashborne was looking at her like a man watching fate sharpen its teeth. Then suddenly, a bell rang above the archives. Once, twice, 3 times. Emergency summons. Draven's expression hardened instantly. Ronan's voice echoed distantly through the stairwell above. My king! The Western delegates are demanding immediate audience. Draven closed his eyes briefly. The timing is not accidental. Alara rose shakily. What does that mean? His gaze sharpened toward the doors. It means someone wants the court gathered tonight. His voice lowered dangerously. And in this kingdom, that usually means blood is about to be spilled. The great hall of Ashborne had been built to intimidate kings. Its ceiling disappeared into darkness, above iron chandeliers large enough to hold burning trees. Ancient banners hung between towering stone pillars, carved with the victories of dead Alpha rulers. Wolf skulls lined the upper walls beside silver war shields, stained black with age. Even the long feast tables seemed designed less for celebration than conquest. Tonight, every candle in the hall burned, and every noble in the kingdom watched Alara like prey entering a den of starving wolves. Music echoed softly from the gallery balconies overhead, as servants poured dark wine into silver goblets. The Western delegates had arrived in ceremonial armor trimmed with white fur, their expressions carefully neutral beneath the flickering torchlight. Rival alphas whispered among themselves behind jeweled hands. Members of the royal council sat close together like vultures waiting for a corpse to stop breathing. At the center of it all sat King Draven, cold, silent, untouchable. The throne beside him remained empty, waiting for her. Alara paused near the entrance, while servants adjusted the black ceremonial cloak over her shoulders. She could feel hundreds of eyes following every breath she took. 3 nights ago, she had belonged to the kitchens. Now she stood at the edge of the most dangerous seat in the northern kingdoms, and the palace hated her for surviving long enough to reach it. Walk, whispered one of the older servants behind her. Not kindly, warningly. Ilara forced herself forward. The music faded slowly as she crossed the hall. Nobles stopped speaking one by one. Some stared openly at the faint silver embroidery, marking her as future Luna. Others looked at her with naked disgust. But the worst were those who looked afraid. Draven watched her approach without moving. Only when she reached the raised platform before the throne did he finally rise. The movement alone silenced the hall completely. He extended one hand toward her. Not gently, not warmly, formally. A king, offering acknowledgement before witnesses. Ilara placed her hand in his. The moment their skin touched, a strange pulse moved through her chest. The beast inside her stirred again. Hungry. Draven felt it too. His fingers tightened once before he released her, and guided her toward the empty throne beside his own. Murmurs spread immediately through the nobles, because no unofficial Luna sat beside the king before the moon-binding ceremony. Draven sat anyway, forcing the court to either accept the insult or challenge him publicly. Lord Cadron rose slowly from the council table. There are traditions older than kingship itself, the old counselor said smoothly. Perhaps His Majesty forgets them tonight. No, Draven replied calmly. I remember them better than most. Cadron's pale eyes shifted toward Ilara. Then surely you remember the old laws regarding untested blood. Tension tightened through the hall instantly. Draven's expression remained unreadable. Speak plainly. The old man inclined his head slightly. The Western delegates have requested a demonstration. Ilara felt danger immediately. What kind of demonstration? Draven asked coldly. One of the Western alphas stood. Massive and broad-shouldered with gray streaks through his beard, he wore the crimson crest of House Vero. His gaze lingered on Ilara with open suspicion. There are rumors spreading through the northern territories, he said. Strange rumors. Wolves bowing, darkness moving beneath palace walls. A slave girl raised suddenly to Luna. His jaw hardened. My people deserve reassurance that Ashborne remains stable. Translation. They believed the kingdom was weakening, and predators always circled weakness. Draven leaned back slowly upon the throne. You crossed mountain borders during a blizzard to ask whether I control my own palace? The Alpha did not flinch. I crossed mountain borders because kingdoms have burned before over hidden curses. Silence. The word curse spread through the hall like poison. Ilara felt every noble watching her now. Waiting. Draven's voice lowered dangerously. Careful. But Lord Cadron stepped in smoothly before conflict could ignite. No insult was intended, only caution. The Western houses merely request that the future Luna undergo the old moon rites before witnesses. Ilara's stomach dropped. She knew enough palace history to understand what that meant. The moon rites were ancient blood rituals once used to test corrupted wolves during wartime. Silver. Blood. Moonstone. And if darkness answered inside the accused, execution followed. Draven went completely still, which frightened her more than anger would have. You planned this, he said softly. Cadron bowed his head. The court planned for protection. Seraphine sat near the Western delegates tonight dressed in silver silk, beautiful as winter moonlight. She did not smile. She did not need to. Her silence already tasted like victory. Draven looked toward Ilara briefly. Something passed through his eyes then. Warning. Do not agree. But the hall had already cornered them. If she refused the rites, the Western pacts would assume Ashborne hid forbidden magic. Political panic would spread before dawn. Rivals would challenge Draven's authority. The council might even force a vote against the crown. And if Draven protected her openly now, they would see weakness, where a king could not afford weakness. Ilara understood suddenly. This was never about truth. It was about making Draven choose publicly between his throne and the girl he had dragged from chains. Cadron knew exactly what he was doing. Draven rose slowly from the throne. No. The word cracked through the hall. Several nobles, visibly, stiffened. But Cadron did not retreat. Your Majesty? I said no. Power rolled through his voice like distant thunder. Every wolf in the room felt it instinctively. Dominance. Authority. The Alpha King standing before challenge. Yet even now, The council did not back down, because they smelled blood beneath the throne. The Western Alpha stepped forward again. If Ashborne refuses ancient law, then perhaps the rumors are true. Draven's silver eyes sharpened lethally, and perhaps House Vero forgets whose mountains they stand inside. The hall turned deadly quiet. Ilara realized then how close war truly lived beneath noble politeness. One wrong word, one exposed weakness, and kingdoms tore each other apart. But before Draven could escalate further, Ilara stood. Every gaze snapped toward her immediately. "My lady," Kadrin said silkily, "perhaps you would like to speak for yourself." Draven's jaw tightened sharply. "Ilara," he warned quietly. She looked at him, and saw it clearly now. He was trying to protect her, not because he trusted her fully, not because he understood what she was, but because somewhere between the throne hall and the archives, protecting her had become instinct. That frightened him almost as much as it frightened her. Ilara turned toward the court. Her pulse thundered violently, but she forced her voice steady. "What happens during the moon rites?" Kadrin smiled faintly. "Cruel old wolf. Silver chains. Sacred moonstone. Truth revealed before witnesses." His pale gaze sharpened. "If your soul carries no corruption, you walk free. And if it does, death." Draven stepped toward her immediately. "You owe them nothing." The entire court watched. Ilara felt the weight of it pressing down from every direction. Fear, suspicion, expectation. She remembered the slave pens, the collars, the years spent surviving by lowering her eyes and staying small enough to overlook. If she hid now, they would never stop hunting her. And deep inside, the thing beneath her skin was growing restless. Waiting. "I'll do it," she said quietly. Draven stared at her. "Ilara, if I refuse," she whispered so only he could hear, "they'll tear your kingdom apart, searching for reasons." A dangerous silence passed between them. Then his voice lowered into something rougher, more personal. "You think I care more about the kingdom right now?" The words struck unexpectedly deep. Before she could answer, Kadrin struck his cane once against the stone floor. "Then let the rites begin." The servants moved quickly. Too quickly. As if preparations had already been waiting. Of course they had. The center feast tables were dragged aside, revealing a massive moon symbol carved into the black marble floor beneath them. Silver chains were carried forward by temple guards. Moonstones glowing pale blue were arranged around the ritual circle, and suddenly Ilara understood the terrifying truth. This was not a test prepared tonight. This had been planned before the feast even began. Seraphine watched silently from her seat, while the court gathered closer around the ritual space. Not hopeful. Certain. Draven stepped near Ilara one final time before the rites began. His expression had become unreadable again, but tension radiated beneath his control. "If anything feels wrong," he said quietly, "stop the ritual immediately." She almost laughed. Everything already felt wrong. Temple guards approached her carefully, carrying silver restraints. The moment Ilara saw the chains, something inside her recoiled violently. Not fear. Memory. Her breathing changed instantly. The growl returned. Low. Ancien. Hungry. Draven heard it first. His eyes sharpened. "Ilara?" But it was too late. The guards locked the silver around her wrists. Pain exploded through her body. The hall darkened, and somewhere far beneath Ashborne Palace, something monstrous awakened completely. The scream that tore from Ilara's throat did not sound human. It echoed through the great hall like something ancient, waking beneath stone graves, sharp enough to extinguish half the candles in the chamber. The moment the silver restraints closed around her wrists, black veins erupted violently beneath her skin, spreading across her arms and throat, like living shadows clawing upward toward her face. Panic exploded through the nobles. Several stumbled backward instantly. One of the Western delegates shouted for guards. But the guards themselves were already retreating, because every wolf in the hall had lowered its head. Not in fear. Submission. The moonstones surrounding the ritual circle began to crack one by one. Draven moved first. Ilara. He reached for her, and the floor beneath the ritual circle shattered. Darkness burst outward in a violent wave. The silver chains snapped apart like thread as black smoke erupted around Ilara's body, spiraling upward toward the vaulted ceiling. Nobles screamed, tables overturned. Wolves hidden beneath noble skin whined and clawed desperately against instincts they could not control. Ilara collapsed to her knees, gasping. The thing inside her was no longer sleeping. It was furious. Memories flooded her mind faster than thought. A kingdom burning beneath a dead moon. Soldiers driving silver spears through chained beasts. A woman screaming while black veins spread across her skin. And a voice repeating over and over, "Seal it, before the betrayal spreads." Ilara. Draven's hands caught her shoulders. The instant he touched her, shadow exploded across the hall walls behind them. A gigantic wolf shape appeared in the darkness. Massive, horned, made of living black smoke and burning silver eyes. The entire court froze. Someone whispered in horror, "Shadow Wolf." The creature's head lowered slowly behind Ilara like a guardian standing over its queen. Chaos erupted instantly. "Kill it. Protect. The king. Moon preserve us." Guards rushed forward with silver blades. The Shadow Wolf snarled once. Every weapon in the hall shattered. Metal burst apart midair, as if crushed by invisible jaws. Soldiers were thrown backward violently against pillars and tables. One Western Alpha shifted partially in panic, before collapsing unconscious beneath the creature's gaze. And through all of it, Ilara remained kneeling at the center of the ruined ritual circle, terrified, because she could feel the beast's thoughts now. Not words. Instinct. Rage. Hunger. Protect her. Destroy betrayal. Draven stepped between her and the advancing guards immediately. No one touched her. His voice thundered through the hall with alpha command. Some guards obeyed instantly. Others hesitated, because the thing towering behind Ilara no longer looked like magic. It looked like a kingdom-ending monster. Lord Kadrin backed away slowly, pale for the first time since she had met him. Impossible. Draven's gaze snapped toward him. "You knew." The old counselor's composure cracked. The bloodline was supposed to be extinct. The words struck Ilara like ice water. Bloodline. Not curse. Not corruption. Bloodline. The Shadow Wolf growled again. This time the sound carried memories with it. Ilara saw soldiers in silver armor hunting women through snow-covered forests. Children dragged from hidden villages. Wolves slaughtered in chains. Not monsters. People. The Shadow bloodline had not vanished naturally. They had been exterminated. A sharp pain suddenly ripped through Draven. He staggered hard beside her. Black veins surged across his neck beneath the collar of his armor. The court gasped, collectively, because the king's curse was reacting too. No. Merging. Draven gritted his teeth violently, as silver light flashed briefly beneath his skin like something trying to tear free. Ilara. Irraspit. She grabbed his arm instinctively. The moment their skin touched fully, the Shadow Wolf roared. Every torch in the great hall exploded black. Darkness consumed the chamber. And in that darkness, the ancient beast finally showed itself completely. Not smoke. Not illusion. A colossal wolf, formed from shadow and moonfire, towered above the shattered ritual circle, its fur moving like black storms beneath silver eyes. The court broke. Nobles fled, screaming toward the exits. Guards dropped weapons and ran. Several Western delegates fell to their knees, praying. Even hardened warriors backed away from the sheer impossible terror filling the hall. But the beast did not attack. It stood behind Ilara, protecting, waiting. Then suddenly, someone moved. Seraphine. While the hall drowned in panic, she drew a hidden silver blade from beneath her gown and lunged toward Ilara with desperate fury. "You cursed bitch!" Draven reacted instantly. He intercepted her wrist before the blade could strike. The force of the collision sent silver sparks across the darkened hall. Seraphine stared at him in disbelief. "She'll destroy all of us!" "She already saved this kingdom once," Draven snarled, "and now she'll end it." The Shadow Wolf's eyes locked onto Seraphine. The noblewoman froze instantly, because for one horrifying moment, the beast recognized her. Not by scent, by guilt. Ilara felt it clearly. The creature hated betrayal above all things, and Seraphine carried betrayal like blood beneath skin. The beast moved, not attacking, hunting. Seraphine screamed as darkness swept toward her. Draven shoved her backward just before shadow claws tore through the marble where she had stood. Stone exploded outward across the hall. "Ilara!" Draven shouted sharply. "Control it!" "I don't know how." The shadow wolf prowled around the ruined ritual circle, enormous enough now that its head nearly brushed the chandeliers above. Every step cracked marble beneath massive claws of black moonfire. The beast was searching. For traitors. For threats. For blood. Kadrin suddenly shouted toward the guards. "Silver spears! Now!" "No!" Draven roared. Too late. One terrified guard hurled a silver spear directly toward Ilara. The shadow wolf moved instantly. Faster than sight. The spear shattered harmlessly against black claws, and the beast retaliated. A wave of shadow burst across the hall violently, slamming soldiers into pillars hard enough to crack stone. One nobleman nearly flew over the balcony rail before crashing unconscious into overturned tables. The great hall descended fully into war. Screams, smoke, shattered glass, moonfire, and at the center of it all stood Ilara, trembling beneath black veins spreading across half her face. The transformation had begun. She could feel it. Her teeth sharpened painfully. Darkness crawled beneath her skin like living creatures. Her senses sharpened until she could hear heartbeats across the hall. And worst of all, the beast's emotions were becoming hers. Anger, protectiveness, possessive violence. Draven saw it happening immediately. "Ilara, look at me." She tried. Gods, she tried. But the shadow wolf kept pushing against her mind. Destroy them. Protect the mate. Kill betrayal. Mate. The words struck her like lightning. Her gaze snapped toward Draven. The beast considered him hers. No. Worse. It recognized him. Draven approached carefully despite the chaos around them. His wolf eyes glowed silver now, barely restrained beneath human form. "Ilara," he said quietly, firmly. "Listen to my voice." Another spear flew from somewhere in the hall. This time Draven caught it with his bare hand before it reached her. Silver tore through his palm. He hissed sharply in pain, and suddenly the shadow wolf lost control completely. The beast roared with such force the chandeliers above shattered. Every remaining candle exploded. Darkness swallowed the hall again, and this time, the monster attacked. Shadow swept through the chamber like a living storm. Guards were thrown aside. Silver weapons melted black. Marble cracked beneath monstrous claws. Ilara screamed as the beast surged through her body fully for one terrifying heartbeat. She saw through its eyes. Hundreds of enemies. Threats. Betrayers. And one wounded king, bleeding silver before her. Mine. The word shook her soul. Then, Draven spoke her name. Not as king. Not as ruler. As if she were someone he could not bear to lose. Ilara. Everything stopped. The shadow wolf froze mid-strike. The entire hall went silent, except for distant storm winds outside. Ilara stood trembling in the center of darkness, black veins covering half her body now, while silver tears streamed down her face. And slowly, the beast bowed. Not to the court, not to the kingdom. To him. Shock crashed through the nobles, still conscious enough to witness it. Because monsters did not bow. Not even legends. Draven stepped toward her carefully, through shattered marble and extinguished firelight. Then, before the entire royal court of Ashborne, the Alpha King dropped to one knee before the slave girl carrying the kingdom's deadliest bloodline. And the hall realized all at once. The balance of power had just changed forever. No one in the great hall moved. The shattered chandeliers still swayed overhead. Smoke drifted through broken torchlight. Nobles stood frozen among overturned tables and cracked marble, while the monstrous shadow behind Ilara slowly dissolved back into darkness. but the image remained burned into every mind present. The Alpha King of Ashborne kneeling before a former slave. Not in defeat. Recognition. Draven rose slowly, silver blood dripping from the wound in his palm where the spear had pierced him. Yet he did not look weakened. If anything, something inside him had sharpened. The curse beneath his skin had quieted. Ilara could feel it. The darkness inside her recognized his presence, the way storms recognize the moon. That terrified her more than the transformation itself. Around them, the surviving nobles finally began recovering from shock. And fear quickly turned political. She's controlling him. That creature answered her blood. The king bowed. She must die before dawn. The whispers spread like wildfire through the ruined hall. Draven heard every word. His gaze swept across the court with lethal calm. Anyone wishing to test that opinion may step forward now. Silence. No one moved. Not even the Western Alphas. Because despite everything they had witnessed, Draven Ashborne still looked like the most dangerous thing in the room. Then Lord Cadron stepped forward slowly. The old counselor's face had gone pale, but his mind remained sharp behind frightened eyes. "Your Majesty," he said carefully. "The kingdom cannot survive this revelation." Draven's expression hardened. "You mean your secrets cannot?" Cadron ignored the accusation. The shadow bloodline was sealed for a reason. Ilara lifted her gaze sharply. "You knew my family." The old man finally looked directly at her. Not with cruelty this time. With something worse. Regret. "Not personally," he admitted. "But I know what happened to them." The hall quieted again. Even the nobles leaned closer now. Ancient truths were more dangerous than monsters in kingdoms built on lies. Draven's voice lowered dangerously. "Choose your next words carefully, Cadron." But the old counselor surprised them both. "No," he said quietly. "Enough lies." A strange tension passed through the room. Seraphine stared at him sharply from where healers wrapped her bleeding arm after the Shadow Wolf's attack. "What are you doing?" she hissed. Cedron did not answer her. His pale gaze remained fixed on Ilara. 400 years ago, he said, the northern kingdoms nearly fell during the Blood Wars. Entire packs turned against one another. Wolves slaughtered their own mates. Armies vanished beneath black storms. Ilara felt the beast inside her listening. "The kings blamed a creature called the Shadow Wolf," Cadron continued. But the truth was more complicated. Draven's jaw tightened visibly. He already knew part of this story. Not all of it. The Shadow bloodline carried rare lunar magic, Cadron said. Magic tied directly to emotional bonds. Betrayal strengthened it. Grief transformed it. Love. His expression darkened. Love made it unstoppable. Cold spread through Ilara's chest. The queen who loved too deeply became the beast. Not metaphor. Truth. "The first Shadow Queen lost her mate during the war," Cadron said softly. The pain awakened something catastrophic inside her bloodline. Entire cities burned beneath her rage. The nobles listened in horrified silence. "She begged the kings to kill her," Cadron whispered. Instead, they hunted every surviving member of her family across the northern territories. Ilara's breathing turned uneven. "Exterminated. Not cursed. Murdered. They erased your bloodline from history," Cadron admitted. "Any child showing signs of shadow magic was executed immediately." Draven's eyes darkened lethally. And yet somehow she survived. Cadron looked toward Ilara with grim understanding. Someone hit her. The realization hit Ilara violently. The old woman from the slave yards. Never bleed beneath moonlight. Little shadow. Not madness. Protection. She knew, Ilara whispered. Cadron nodded once slowly. "Whoever raised you understood what you carried." Seraphine stepped forward sharply despite her injury. "Why are we discussing ancient tragedies while that thing still breathes?" Because fear had returned now. The first shock had faded, and the court was beginning to think again. Dangerous. Draven moved subtly closer to Ilara. Protective instinct. The Shadow Wolf purred darkly beneath her ribs at the motion. Seraphine noticed. Her expression sharpened instantly. "There," she whispered. "You see it too." The hall tensed again. She reacts to him, Seraphine continued carefully, and his curse reacts to her. Her pale gaze shifted toward Draven. Tell them the truth. A dangerous silence followed. Ilara looked toward him slowly. Draven's face became unreadable once more. Then she understood. There was another secret. Of course there was. Kings were made of secrets. What truth? Ilara asked quietly. Draven did not answer. Seraphine smiled faintly through the blood at the corner of her mouth. The royal curse did not begin naturally, she said. It began with her bloodline. The hall erupted again. Draven's voice cracked through the chamber instantly. Enough. But Seraphine no longer cared. Perhaps because she realized the political game had already shattered beyond repair. Or perhaps because fear finally outweighed caution. Your ancestors chained the Shadow Queen beneath the mountain, she shouted. And her mate cursed the Ashborne bloodline before dying. Silence slammed through the great hall. Ilara stared at Draven. His silence confirmed everything. The shadow wolf growled low inside her chest. Not rage. Recognition. The old kings had not merely hunted her bloodline. They had betrayed it. Draven stepped toward her carefully. Ilara, you knew. His jaw tightened. Not all of it, but enough. The pain in her voice cut deeper than accusation, because suddenly everything connected. The curse. The archives. His reaction to her blood. The kingdom itself had been built atop betrayal between their bloodlines, and now those ancient wounds had awakened again. Draven lowered his voice. I was trying to protect you. From what? Ilara whispered. Your ancestors? Something flickered across his face then. Guilt. Real guilt. Not for what he had done, for what his blood carried. The shadow wolf stirred violently at her hurt. Black veins crawled higher along her throat. Several nobles backed away immediately. Ilara, Draven warned softly, but she could barely hear him. The beast fed on emotional pain. Betrayal strengthens it. Guts. That was why Seraphine had told her the truth about Draven earlier. Why the court forced the moon rites publicly. Why silver chains triggered memories buried in blood itself. They had unknowingly fed the shadow wolf exactly what it needed most. Fear, isolation, betrayal. The floor beneath Ilara cracked softly. Dark smoke curled around her feet again. Ronan suddenly stepped into the ruined hall from the outer corridor, sword already drawn. He stopped dead the moment he saw the destruction. My king. Then he noticed the veins across Ilara's face, and the fear returned instantly to every guard behind him. Draven straightened immediately into command. Seal the hall. No one leaves. Kadrin looked sharply toward him. You would imprison the entire court? I would prevent panic from reaching the outer territories before dawn. Smart. Because once the northern kingdoms learned the shadow bloodline lived again, every rival pack would move. Some to destroy her. Some to use her. Some to overthrow Ashborne entirely. Ronan approached cautiously. There are already rumors spreading through the lower city. Of course there were. Servants always heard first. Draven's expression darkened. How bad? The captain hesitated. Then, they're calling her the Black Luna. Silence followed. Ilara felt something cold move through her chest. Not fear. Recognition. The Black Luna. The title felt ancient. Familiar. The shadow wolf approved. Draven noticed the flicker in her expression immediately. Ilara. But before she could answer, a scream echoed from outside the hall. Then another. The entire chamber froze. Ronan spun toward the doors instantly. What was that? A palace guard burst inside moments later, bleeding heavily from deep claw marks across his armor. My king, he gasped. The lower prison. He collapsed hard onto the marble floor. Behind him came distant howling. Not ordinary wolves. War wolves. Hundreds of them. And suddenly every noble in Ashborne realized the same horrifying truth at once. The beasts beneath the palace were no longer trying to escape. They were coming for her. The howling shook the palace foundations. Deep. Violent. Hungry. It rose from beneath Ashborne like a storm clawing its way out of the mountain itself. Nobles stumbled backward in terror as the sound echoed through the great hall. Somewhere far below, iron gates crashed open one after another. The war-wolves were loose. Ronan moved first. "Seal every corridor leading to the upper halls." The guards sprinted instantly. "Tu latte." A distant scream echoed through the palace. Then, another. Then, silence. The kind of silence that only came after something had died. Panic erupted among the nobles again. "We must evacuate. They'll slaughter everyone. The lower gates have fallen." Draven's voice cut through the chaos like steel. "Enough." The command slammed into the room with alpha force strong enough to rattle shattered glass. Everyone froze instinctively. Even Alara felt it. Power. Authority forged through war and blood and survival. Draven turned sharply toward Ronan. "Get the western delegates to the northern towers. Double the silver guard around the council chamber." Ronan nodded immediately, but before he could move, the great hall doors exploded inward. Massive bodies crashed through splintered wood and twisted iron. War-wolves. 7 of them. Their black fur dripped with blood. Silver chains still hung broken from their necks. Each beast was nearly the size of a horse, bred through generations for battle alone. Their pale eyes glowed wildly with feral madness. The nobles screamed. Guards raised weapons instantly. But the wolves ignored everyone. Every single monstrous creature stared directly at Alara. The shadow wolf inside her rose immediately. Not violently, commandingly. The beasts advanced slowly across the ruined hall. One western noble broke first and hurled a silver dagger toward the lead wolf. The creature snarled. Before anyone could react, Alara lifted her hand instinctively. "Stop." The word left her mouth like a pulse of darkness. Every werewolf froze instantly. The dagger dropped harmlessly to the floor. Silence crashed through the hall. Then, slowly, on a biwan, the wolves lowered themselves to the marble. Submission. The court stared in horror. Werewolves bowed only to dominant bloodlines. Even kings struggled to control them fully. Yet these creatures knelt before a former slave without hesitation. Ronan's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Moon above." The lead wolf crawled closer toward Alara, carefully despite its massive size. Blood soaked the fur along its shoulder from some unseen fight below the palace. It lowered its enormous head beside her feet, like a soldier returning to its queen. The shadow wolf purred darkly inside her chest. "Mine." Alara's pulse shook. No. She was not controlling them intentionally, but the beasts felt her fear, her confusion, and still, they obeyed. Draven watched the entire scene with frightening stillness. Not fear, calculation. Because unlike the nobles panicking around him, the king understood what this meant politically. If the northern territories learned the war-wolves obeyed her, they would never see her as merely dangerous again. They would see her as a ruler. Kadrin realized it too, which was why the old counselor suddenly shouted, "Kill them." Guards hesitated. No one wanted to attack creatures kneeling peacefully. Kadrin struck his cane sharply against the floor. Now, a silver spear flew from the side of the hall, straight toward Alara. Draven reacted instantly, but the warwolf moved faster. The beast lunged in front of her. The spear pierced directly through its throat. Blood exploded across the marble. The creature collapsed at Alara's feet with a choking whine. Something inside her broke. Not mentally. Primal instinct. The shadow wolf erupted violently beneath her skin. Black veins surged across her face again. The surviving war wolves snarled in fury, and every torch in the great hall turned black. Darkness swallowed the chamber. A scream tore through the nobles as shadows swept violently across the floor like living smoke. The remaining wolves rose instantly, circling Alara with murderous intent aimed outward. Protect her. Kill betrayal. Alara dropped beside the dying wolf instinctively. No. The beast trembled beneath her hands, pale eyes fixed on her face. Then suddenly, a memory struck her. Not her own. The wolf, as a pup chained beneath the kennels, beaten by handlers, starved, terrified, and somewhere in the darkness, a little girl secretly feeding it scraps through iron bars. Ilara gasped sharply. The wolf knew her. Not from now. From years ago. You, she whispered. The creature whimpered softly. The slave child had once cared for a monster everyone else feared. And somehow, the beast remembered. The dying wolf pressed weakly against her hand one final time, then went still. The shadow wolf roared inside her soul. The force of grief shattered the remaining moonstones across the hall. Darkness exploded outward. Several nobles were thrown violently backward by the surge of power. Pillars cracked. Windows burst inward beneath black wind. And standing at the center of it all, Ilara began to transform. Claws tore through her fingertips. Shadows spread across her skin like armor. Silver light ignited behind her eyes. The court recoiled in horror. Draven stepped toward her anyway. Ilara. She could barely hear him. The beast wanted blood now. It remembered chains, fine, execution, and the court surrounding her smelled exactly like the people who once hunted her bloodline. Kill them. The thought wasn't entirely the beast's anymore. That terrified her most. Draven moved closer carefully through the darkness swirling around her. The surviving werewolves immediately snarled warningly, but he did not stop. Ilara, he said again, lower this time. Look at me. Her vision blurred between human sight and something ancient. She saw heat beneath skin, heartbeats, fear. Every noble in the hall looked prey-like now, except him. Draven still looked dangerous, still looked like someone capable of standing beside monsters instead of running from them. The king reached her slowly. The black smoke curling around her claws lashed violently toward him. But instead of retreating, he grabbed her hand. Pain shot through both of them instantly. Black veins surged across Draven's wrist, while silver light burst beneath Ilara's skin. The hall shook violently as their curses collided again. And suddenly, they both saw it. A memory not belonging fully to either of them. A king, kneeling before a woman with black tears. Silver chains around her throat. A promise spoken beneath a blood moon. If they betray you, I will burn kingdoms for it. Then screams. War. Execution. Betrayal. The vision shattered violently. Ilara staggered hard against Draven. He caught her immediately. Both breathing unevenly now. What was that? She whispered. Draven's face had gone pale beneath the torchlight. Memory. Her pulse stumbled. Whose? Whose? His silence answered enough. Their bloodlines had been connected long before either of them existed. The realization terrified him. She could see it clearly now. Not because of politics. Not because of power. Because if the old stories were true, their bond had once destroyed kingdoms. Kadrin suddenly stepped backward toward the guards. We cannot allow this to continue. Draven's eyes snapped toward him murderously. Try. The old counselor hesitated for the first time. Because the entire balance of the room had changed. The nobles no longer knew who truly held power here. The king, or the girl standing surrounded by kneeling werewolves and living shadow. Then another voice cut through the hall. Cold, sharp, desperate. She's losing control. Seraphine. The noblewoman stepped forward slowly despite the chaos surrounding them. Blood stained the sleeve of her silver gown from earlier wounds, but hatred burned steadily behind her pale eyes. She already killed half the hall, Seraphine said. How many more before you admit what she is? Ilara's breathing changed again. The beast hated her, not because Seraphine feared her, because Seraphine carried betrayal in her blood like poison. Draven noticed immediately. Ilara, du late. The shadow wolf lunged toward Seraphine. The hall erupted. Guards shouted. Nobles scattered. And for one terrifying instant, Ilara stopped fighting the monster inside her. Seraphine did not run. Even with death rushing toward her in the shape of claws and shadow, she stood her ground at the center of the ruined hall, silver gown stained with blood, pale eyes locked on Ilara with something deeper than fear. Hatred. Not because Ilara carried power, because Ilara carried the thing Seraphine could never control. Draven, the shadow wolf, surged through Ilara's body like black fire. She crossed the hall in a blur of claws and darkness. Marble cracked beneath her feet. Nobles screamed and scattered away from her path. Seraphine raised a silver blade instantly. Too slow. Ilara slammed her against one of the shattered pillars hard enough to split stone. The entire hall froze. Black claws pressed against Seraphine's throat. One movement. One heartbeat. That was all it would take. The beast inside Ilara wanted blood, not random slaughter. Judgment. Traitors deserved death. The instinct felt ancient. Absolute. Seraphine stared directly into Ilara's transformed face and whispered, "You feel it too, don't you?" Ilara's claws tightened instinctively. The rage. Draven moved toward them carefully. "Ilara, let her go." But Seraphine laughed softly, despite the claws at her throat. "That's the problem, isn't it?" she whispered to Ilara. "You can't." The words struck dangerously close to truth. The beast did not want release. It wanted punishment. Ilara could hear heartbeats throughout the hall now, smell fear pouring from the nobles around them, taste silver and blood in the air. And beneath it all, Seraphine's scent carried guilt. The shadow wolf recognized it immediately. Betrayer. Images flashed violently through Ilara's mind. Not memories. Instinctive truths. Poison. Whispers. A dead woman screaming beneath moonfire. Draven suddenly stopped moving. His silver eyes sharpened toward Seraphine with horrifying realization. "What did you do?" The noblewoman smiled. Brokenly. "I loved you." The hall went silent. Draven's expression darkened instantly. "Answer me." Seraphine's eyes flickered toward Ilara. "You think she's the first dangerous woman this kingdom has tied to your bloodline?" Cold spread through the room. Draven's voice became deadly quiet. "Don't." But Seraphine no longer cared. Perhaps because she understood she had already lost. Or perhaps because people drowning in obsession often preferred destruction over surrender. "The first Luna didn't die from your curse," she whispered. Draven froze. Ilara felt it immediately. Shock. Real shock. Seraphine's smile trembled faintly. "I poisoned her." The words shattered through the hall, like broken glass. Several nobles gasped aloud. Ronan's face went pale with disbelief. Even Kadrin looked horrified. Draven stared at Seraphine as though seeing a stranger for the first time. "You lied to me. I saved you." The desperation in her voice finally surfaced fully. "You loved her." Seraphine whispered shakily. "You were going to weaken the throne for her. You stopped listening to the council. You stopped listening to me." Draven's silence turned terrifying. The shadows around Ilara thickened violently in response to his pain. "She was your mate," Seraphine continued, tears finally gathering in her eyes. "And mates destroy kings." The hall felt frozen, because suddenly everyone understood the truth. Draven's curse. His fear of touch. The dead Luna. None of it had happened naturally. Someone had murdered the woman he loved, then allowed him to believe his own bloodline caused her death. The betrayal rolled off him in waves so sharp Ilara almost staggered from it, and the shadow wolf drank every drop. Betrayal strengthens it. Gods. That was why the beast had reacted so violently to Seraphine from the beginning. Not jealousy. Recognition. The shadow wolf existed to punish betrayal between bonded souls. Seraphine looked toward Ilara with hollow hatred. "And now, it's happening again." Draven's voice came out dangerously soft. "You killed her because I would not choose you. I killed her because I knew what love makes men become." Silence. Then Draven asked the question that truly mattered. "The poison." Seraphine smiled faintly through tears. "Moon. Silver root." Her gaze flickered toward Ilara, mixed with traces of shadow blood. Cold realization spread through the hall instantly. Ilara understood before anyone spoke. The poison had not merely killed Draven's Luna. It had corrupted the bond itself, merged his bloodline curse with traces of shadow magic. That was why his curse reacted to Ilara now. Not because their bloodlines were enemies, because someone had fused them together through betrayal. The shadow wolf, inside Alara, became utterly still. Listening. Understanding. Draven stepped closer slowly. Every noble in the hall seemed afraid to breathe. "When were you planning to tell me?" he asked quietly. Seraphine laughed once. Small. Broken. "When you finally looked at me." The answer hit harder than rage ever could. Because obsession built from loneliness always carried tragedy somewhere beneath it. Draven's face hardened completely. Whatever emotion remained there vanished behind kingly coldness. "You murdered your Luna," Cadron whispered in disbelief. Seraphine snapped toward him violently. "And you helped cover it." The hall erupted again. "Cadron, Ventbala." Ronan's hand dropped immediately toward his sword. Draven's eyes sharpened lethally. "Explain." The old counselor suddenly looked far older than before. "We feared instability," he admitted quietly. The kingdom had barely survived the border wars. If word spread that the royal mate bond itself had become corrupted. "So you lied," Draven said. "We protected the throne." "No," Draven replied coldly. "You protected yourselves." The truth settled heavily through the hall. The council had hidden murder, manipulated the king, allowed him to believe his own bloodline killed the woman he loved. And now they had nearly repeated history with Alara. The shadow wolf's growl returned softly beneath Alara's ribs. Not raging now, judging. Seraphine suddenly looked toward Alara again, almost pleading. "You understand me better than any of them," she whispered. "You know what it feels like to love something powerful enough to ruin you." Alara's claws trembled slightly against her throat, because part of her did understand. Loneliness twisted long enough became obsession. Fear of losing someone became willingness to destroy them. The shadow bloodline itself had been born from betrayed love, and suddenly Alara realized the terrifying truth. The beast inside her was not created from hatred. It was created from grief. Draven stepped closer carefully. "Alara." She looked toward him slowly. His expression had changed. No longer merely protective, no longer suspicious. He looked at her now, like a man finally seeing the shape of his own ruin and wanting it anyway. "Let her go," he said quietly. The hall held its breath. The old Shadow Queen had burned kingdoms after betrayal. Everyone expected blood now, expected the monster to choose vengeance. Instead, Alara slowly withdrew her claws from Seraphine's throat. The noblewoman collapsed hard against the broken pillar, gasping. Shock spread visibly through the court. Merce, the Black Luna, had shown mercy. The shadow wolf stirred uneasily inside Alara at the choice, but did not fight her. Interesting. Draven noticed too. The beast obeyed her now. Not fully, but enough. Ronan suddenly stepped forward sharply. "My king." Draven turned. The captain's face had gone grim. "There's another problem." As if the night required more. "What now?" Draven asked coldly. Ronan hesitated. "Then, the outer armies have arrived." Silence. Cadron's expression darkened instantly. "The Western Pacts?" Ronan nodded once. "Not just them. 3 northern houses." Alara's pulse quickened. "They came for me." "No," Draven said grimly. His silver eyes lifted toward the storm-dark windows, overlooking the mountain passes beyond Ashborne. "They came because they believe the throne is vulnerable." Outside, war horns began echoing through the snow-covered cliffs. Long, low, ancien, the sound of kingdoms preparing for battle. War banners appeared through the storm before midnight. From the upper battlements of Ashborne Palace, torch lines stretched across the mountain roads below like rivers of fire cutting through snow. Thousands of soldiers moved beneath the blizzard, carrying the crests of rival northern houses. Varro wolves in crimson armor, House Edric's silver riders, black-furred mountain clans from the eastern cliffs. Not an invasion. Not yet. A judgment. The northern kingdoms had come to see whether Ashborne still deserved its throne. And at the center of the storm stood a former slave carrying the oldest nightmare in their history. Alara stood beside the battlement wall, while freezing wind whipped black strands of hair across her face. Below, the armies gathered in silence beneath snow-dark skies. No one attacked. No one retreated. Waiting. Kings always waited to see weakness before drawing blood. Behind her, the palace had become a hive of panic and steel. Guards rushed through corridors. Noble families locked themselves inside protected chambers. Temple priests lit silver fires along the walls while whispering prayers against shadow curses. And somewhere beneath all that fear, the kingdom watched her. The Black Luna. The title spread faster than fire. Draven approached quietly beside her. Even exhausted and half-cursed beneath the moonlight, he still carried himself like something impossible to break. But Alara could see it now. The strain beneath his control. The black veins faintly shadowing his throat whenever pain surged through him. Seraphine's poison had never stopped killing him. It had simply learned patience. "The Western armies won't attack tonight," Draven said. "You sound certain." "They fear what they saw in the hall." Alara looked toward the gathered forces below. "Fear doesn't stop kingdoms forever." "No," he admitted, "but it buys time." Silence settled between them, while snow drifted across the battlements. The shadow wolf inside her remained restless, not violent, watching, as though ancient instincts studied the armies below and remembered wars older than memory. Draven finally spoke again. "You spared Seraphine." Alara kept her gaze on the storm. "Did you want me to kill her?" His answer came too slowly. "No. Truth. But painful truth. Because some part of him probably had wanted vengeance, not only for the murdered Luna, for the years stolen from him by lies." Alara understood that feeling too well. "When I was young," she said quietly, "one of the slave masters used to drown wolf pups that were born weak." Draven turned toward her immediately. She barely noticed. "I found one still alive once." Her voice remained calm, but the memory sharpened beneath it. Blind in one eye. Too small to survive. Snow gathered across the stone beside her hands. "I hid food for it every night until they discovered us." Draven's expression darkened. "They beat me for 3 days." The wind howled softly around them. "And the wolf?" he asked. Ilara's silver-gray eyes lifted toward him. "It survived." Realization crossed his face instantly. "The werewolf from the hall." She nodded once. The massive beast had remembered her, even after years underground. Draven studied her carefully now, not as mystery, not as monster, as someone who had remained kind, despite every reason not to be. That unsettled him more than the shadow wolf ever could. "You saved dangerous things long before me," he said quietly. A strange silence followed, because suddenly the words no longer sounded political. Alara looked away first. Dangerous. Yes, that was exactly what he was. Below them, another war horn echoed through the mountains. This one closer. Ronan emerged onto the battlements moments later, snow covering his dark armor. His expression alone warned trouble. "My king, the outer houses are demanding audience before dawn." "Terms?" Draven asked coldly. Ronan hesitated. "They want the girl surrendered. Not Luna. Not Alara. The girl. Because stripping people of names made sacrifice easier." Draven's face hardened instantly. "And if I refuse, they'll declare Ashborne corrupted by forbidden blood." Alara closed her eyes briefly. There it was. The choice the kingdom had been building towards since the throne hall. Power or survival. Kingdom or monster. Draven didn't hesitate. "No." Ronan's jaw tightened. "Then there will be war. There was always going to be war." The captain fell silent, because they all understood the truth now. The rival houses had not marched through blizzards merely from fear. They came because Draven's kingdom looked vulnerable. The shadow bloodline simply gave them an excuse. Ronan glanced briefly toward Alara before lowering his voice. "The council is divided. Some still support you." His expression darkened. "Others are already discussing succession." Draven almost smiled at that. Coldly. "Let them." Ronan hesitated again. Then quietly. "And the curse?" The question hung between them. Draven's silver eyes flickered once toward Alara. "It's changing. That frightened Ronan more than expected. Because if the king's curse evolved alongside the shadow wolf, no one knew what they might become together. After the captain left, silence returned to the battlements. Snow continued falling around them in pale spirals. Ilara finally asked the question neither of them had touched yet. What happens if the beast takes over completely? Draven answered honestly. I don't know. She laughed softly once. Brokenly. You say that a lot for a king. His gaze rested on her profile beneath the moonlight. Kings usually lie when they don't know something. The corner of her mouth almost moved. Almost. Then the warmth vanished as quickly as it came, because below the mountain cliffs, the armies had begun lighting execution fires. Ilara recognized the ritual instantly. Silver flame. Shadow cleansing. The rival houses weren't preparing negotiations. They were preparing a public execution. Her execution. The shadow wolf stirred violently at the sight. Draven noticed immediately. Ilara. They'll never stop hunting me. The truth settled heavily between them. Not now. Not after tonight. Even if Ashborne survived politically, the northern kingdoms would never accept the shadow bloodline living freely again. And if fear spread far enough, they would slaughter entire villages, searching for traces of her blood. Just like before, the old wars would begin again. Ilara stepped closer to the battlement edge. Far below, the silver fires glowed like open graves against the snow. I should leave. Draven's head turned sharply toward her. No. If I stay, thousands die. If you leave, they hunt you forever. She looked toward him slowly. Maybe that's better than burning your kingdom down with me. For one dangerous moment, emotion cracked visibly through his control. Not anger. Fear. Real fear. And suddenly Ilara understood something terrifying. The Alpha King was no longer afraid of the monster inside her. He was afraid she would disappear. Draven stepped toward her. Snow gathered in his dark hair beneath moonlight. You think I claimed you because the court cornered me? He asked quietly. Ilara's pulse tightened. At first, he admitted. Honesty. Again. Always brutal. But not anymore. The wind seemed to still around them. The shadow wolf inside her lifted its head silently. Listening. Draven's voice lowered further. When I touched you in the throne hall, my curse stopped hurting for the first time in years. His silver-gray eyes locked onto hers, and tonight, when you nearly lost control, he stepped closer. You still chose mercy. Ilara's breathing became uneven. That doesn't make me safe. No, he said softly. It makes you stronger than everyone in that hall. The words struck deeper than praise should have. Because no one had ever looked at the broken pieces of her and called them strength before. Draven reached toward her slowly. This time she did not pull away. His scarred hand touched her cheek gently, despite the danger between their bloodlines. Warmth spread through her chest instantly, and beneath it, the shadow wolf became still, not asleep, peaceful. The realization hit both of them at once. The beast calmed around him, not because of dominance. Bond, a true mate bond, older than politics, older than kingdoms, perhaps older than the curse itself. Draven saw the understanding appear in her eyes. So did I, he admitted quietly. Ilara's heart stumbled painfully, because mate bonds among wolves were not merely love. They were destiny sharpened into instinct, and destiny had already destroyed their bloodlines once before. Then suddenly, a horn echoed from inside the palace. Urgent. Wrong. Ronan's voice roared from somewhere below. My king. Draven turned instantly toward the stairwell. Ronan burst onto the battlements moments later, breathing hard. The lower gates have been breached. Draven's expression darkened lethally. By who? The captain's face had gone pale beneath the snow. Not soldiers. A distant scream echoed through the mountain halls below them. Then came growling. Not werewolves this time. Something larger. Older. The shadow wolf inside Ilara rose violently, recognizing, and for the first time since awakening, the beast felt fear. The scream below the palace did not end naturally. It cut off suddenly, violently, as if something enormous had swallowed the sound whole. Then came silence. Not ordinary silence. The kind that made wolves lower their ears and prey stop breathing before death arrived. Ronan drew his sword immediately. The lower guard post stopped responding. Draven moved toward the stairwell without hesitation. Seal the upper halls. No one enters the eastern towers. My king. That wasn't a request. Ronan obeyed instantly. Ilara followed Draven down through the palace corridors, while alarm bells began echoing across Ashborne. Servants fled through the halls, clutching children and lanterns. Guards rushed toward the lower levels, with silver spears already drawn. But the deeper they descended, the fewer returned. The shadow wolf inside Ilara had become dangerously alert now. Not hungry. Afraid. That frightened her more than anything else tonight. What is it? Draven asked quietly beside her. I don't know. Lee. She knew one thing clearly. Whatever waited below the palace was older than her bloodline. Older than the werewolves. And somehow connected to the visions haunting her. They reached the lower corridors, just as two injured guards staggered around the corner covered in blood. Your Majesty, one gasped. The chains. Something moved in the darkness behind them. Fast. A black shape slammed into the guards before anyone could react. Bones cracked. Blood sprayed across the stone walls. Ilara froze. The creature lifted its head slowly from the darkness. Not wolf. Not human. Something between. Its body looked twisted together from shadow and bone. Massive claws dragging sparks across the floor while pale eyes burned inside a face stretched unnaturally long. One of the guards still twitched weakly beneath its jaws. The monster bit down once. Silence. Draven stepped instantly in front of Ilara. His sword slid free with a metallic hiss. The creature growled, and the shadow wolf inside Ilara recoiled violently. Not enemy. Kin. Cold flooded her body. The thing before them carried shadow blood too, but corrupted. Broken. What in the gods? Ronan whispered behind them. More growls echoed through the corridor darkness. Not one creature. Several. Draven's expression hardened instantly. The lower seals are broken. Ilara's pulse stumbled. Seals? Draven did not take his eyes off the creature ahead. The first kings imprisoned surviving shadow beasts beneath Ashborne after the Blood Wars. Horror spread slowly through her chest. Not destroyed. Buried alive. The creature suddenly lunged. Draven met it head-on. Steel crashed against claws hard enough to send sparks exploding through the corridor. The beast roared and slammed into him with monstrous force, driving him backward against stone. Ronan shouted for the guards. Silver spears flew instantly. The creature screamed as silver pierced its side. But instead of weakening, black smoke erupted violently from the wounds. The shadow corruption inside it had fused with pain itself. Ilara felt the creature's agony hit her mind like a knife. Not evil. Suffering. Endless suffering. The shadow wolf growled deeply beneath her ribs. Not hatred. Recognition. The beast attacking them had once belonged to the same bloodline. Once. Before centuries of imprisonment twisted it into something monstrous. Another creature burst from the darkness. Then another. The corridor exploded into chaos. Guards screamed. Claws tore through armor. Silver weapons flashed wildly through torchlight. Draven fought like a creature born for war itself. Fast, precise, brutal. His sword severed through black claws while silver eyes glowed dangerously bright beneath his human face. But the curse inside him was worsening. Ilara saw the black veins spreading across his neck again. The creatures smelled it too. One monstrous wolf shape suddenly ignored every guard and lunged directly toward Draven's exposed side. Ilara. She moved, without thinking. Shadow burst from her body violently. The corridor darkened, and for the first time, Ilara fully summoned the shadow wolf willingly. The beast exploded outward behind her, in colossal black form. Massive claws intercepted the attacking creature midair and slammed it into the stone wall hard enough to crack the entire corridor. Every living thing froze. The imprisoned shadow beasts stared at the enormous wolf towering behind Ilara. Then slowly, they lowered themselves to the ground. Submission. Not to her. To the shadow wolf. the ancient predator standing behind its heir. The palace guards stared in horror, because the Black Luna was no longer merely transforming. She was commanding monsters. Ilara's breathing shook violently as power surged through her body. The shadow wolf stood enormous behind her now, black fur moving like storm clouds while silver eyes burned through the corridor darkness. And somehow, she remained herself. Barely. The imprisoned creatures whimpered lowly around her. Goats. They sounded afraid. One creature crawled forward slowly, dragging broken chains behind it. Unlike the others, its face still carried traces of something almost wolf-like beneath the corruption. It looked toward Ilara, then lowered its head fully. A memory struck her instantly. A woman chained beneath the mountain, not the Shadow Queen. Olda, dagger, screaming while kings carved moon seals into her flesh. Ilara gasped sharply. The creature's thoughts bled into hers. Not words. Memory. The kings lied. The realization hit violently. The shadow bloodline had not destroyed the northern kingdoms first. The kings had experimented on them, used them, tried to weaponize shadow magic during the Blood Wars, then buried the survivors when the magic became uncontrollable. Draven saw her expression change instantly. What did you see? Ilara stared at him in a horror. Your ancestors created this. Silence crashed through the corridor. Even Ronan froze. The wounded shadow creatures whimpered softly around them like beaten animals. Draven's jaw tightened. You're certain? Yes. The truth settled heavily between them. Ashborne had not been built merely above ancient tragedy. It had been built above buried crimes. A deep roar suddenly shook the lower foundations beneath their feet. Everything trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. The shadow creatures immediately recoiled in terror. Not from Draven, not from the guards. From whatever remained deeper below, the shadow wolf inside Ilara became utterly still. Fear again. Real fear. Draven's expression darkened. There's something else down there. The crawling creature lifted its head weakly toward Ilara. Then suddenly, it spoke. Not aloud. Inside her mind. He wakes. Ilara stumbled, backward hard. The corridor darkened instantly around her. Draven caught her arm. What happened? Her voice barely emerged. There's another one. The shadow creature whimpered desperately. Not one of us. A distant roar exploded from beneath the palace foundations. This one did not sound wolf-like at all. It sounded ancient, hungry, and furious. The entire mountain shook violently. Somewhere deep beneath Ashborne, something colossal began dragging chains across stone. The sound of chains dragged through the mountain like thunder beneath the earth. Every torch in the lower corridors flickered violently. Dust rained from the ceilings in pale clouds. Far above them, alarm bells across Ashborne began ringing faster, panicked now instead of orderly. The thing beneath the palace was rising. The corrupted shadow creatures surrounding Ilara whimpered and pressed themselves against the walls like terrified hounds. Not one of us. The words echoed endlessly inside her skull. Draven's hand remained locked around her arm, steady and warm despite the chaos shaking the corridors around them. What did it say? He demanded. Ilara forced herself to breathe through the fear clawing up her throat. There's something deeper below the palace. Her eyes lifted slowly toward him. Something even they fear. Another roar shook the foundations. Closer now. Ronan cursed beneath his breath. Whatever that thing is, it's tearing through the lower prison gates. Draven's expression hardened instantly into battlefield focus. Evacuate the lower halls. Seal every corridor leading to the city tunnels. The guards obeyed immediately, but Ilara barely heard them. The shadow wolf inside her had gone completely silent. Not calm. Listening. Like prey hearing the footsteps of a greater predator. The corrupted creature nearest her suddenly crawled closer again despite its injuries. Black blood dripped from silver wounds along its side while broken chains scraped across the stone. Its pale eyes fixed desperately on Ilara, and another memory crashed into her. Not fragments this time. Truth. A king wearing black iron armor kneeling beside a massive chained creature deep beneath the mountain. Priests, carving moon symbols into flesh, soldiers feeding prisoners into darkness, while something unseen devoured them screaming. Weaponize it. The words echoed through the vision. Control the hunger. Then came failure. Blood. Massacre. An entire underground kingdom drowning beneath claws and shadow. Alara gasped sharply and nearly collapsed. Draven caught her instantly. Ilara. She grabbed his arm hard enough to hurt. The First Kings didn't seal the shadow bloodline to stop monsters. His eyes sharpened. They sealed them to hide what they created. Silence crashed through the corridor. Even Ronan stared at her now. Another tremor ripped through the foundations beneath them. Then came screaming from deeper in the tunnels. Human screaming. The thing below had reached the prison guards. Draven looked toward the darkness ahead. Decision settled across his face immediately. I'm ending this tonight. Ronan stepped forward sharply. My king, we don't even know what we're facing. No, Draven agreed coldly. But if it reaches the upper city, thousands die. He looked toward Alara then, and she understood, instantly. He was going below regardless, with or without her. The shadow wolf growled low inside her chest at the thought. Protect the mate. Gods. Even now the beast thought of him that way. I'm coming with you, she said. No. The refusal came instantly. Elara started at him. You think I'll let you walk into something that terrifies even shadow creatures? Draven's voice lowered dangerously. Absolutely not. And you think you can stop it without me? Silence. Because they both knew the answer. No. Whatever waited below was tied to shadow blood somehow, which meant Alara might be the only one capable of surviving it. Draven hated that truth. She could see it clearly. Another roar shook the tunnels violently, this time followed by the sound of stone collapsing somewhere deep below. Ronan drew a sharp breath. It's breaking through the old foundations. Draven closed his eyes briefly, then made the decision. Fine. His silver eyes locked onto Alara's. But you stay beside me at all times. The words should have sounded commanding. Instead, they sounded afraid. Not for himself. For her. The realization twisted unexpectedly deep inside her chest. They moved quickly through the lower tunnels beneath Ashborne, while the remaining guards sealed passageways behind them. The deeper they descended, the older the stone became. Royal architecture disappeared, entirely replaced by rough black walls carved directly into the mountain. Ancient symbols covered everything. Moon, sigils, blood marks, warnings. The air smelled wrong here. Rot, silver, old death. Ilara's pulse grew more uneven with every step downward. The shadow wolf inside her no longer felt merely cautious. It felt furious, as though ancient instincts remembered this place too well. Then, they reached the broken gates. Massive silver doors lay twisted inward like paper. Claw marks gouged deep trenches through solid metal. Ronan stared at the destruction in disbelief. Nothing should be strong enough to bend moonsteel, but Alara already knew the terrifying answer. Whatever waited below was never meant to be imprisoned by ordinary means. Beyond the shattered gates stretched a vast underground chamber, disappearing into darkness. And at its center, a shang, not iron, not silver, black. Enormous links thicker than tree trunks stretched downward into a massive pit carved into the mountain itself. The chain was moving. Slowly, something below was climbing. A low growl echoed upward from the darkness beneath. Not wolf, not beast. Something older than either. The shadow wolf erupted behind Alara instantly, colossal black fur bristling violently. Draven's hand immediately went to his sword. Then, two glowing eyes opened in the pit below. Huge, gold instead of silver. Ancient hatred rolled through the chamber hard enough to steal breath from lungs. The creature climbed slowly into view, and every story about monsters suddenly felt too small. It was enormous, larger than the shadow wolf itself, a creature shaped vaguely like a wolf but twisted beyond nature. Its body covered in black scales instead of fur, while massive antler-like horns curled from its skull. Chains pierced through its flesh in dozens of places, dragging broken moon seals behind it as it climbed upward from the abyss. One side of its face had been torn away long ago, revealing bone beneath blackened flesh. And its eyes looked painfully intelligent. Ronan whispered a prayer under his breath. Draven didn't move, but Alara felt the shock ripple through him anyway, because the creature staring at them was not mindless. It remembered. The monster's gaze settled directly onto Alara. Then the chamber shook with its voice, not spoken aloud. Inside, every mind present. At last, the corrupted shadow creatures immediately collapsed, trembling onto the stone floor. The ancient monster smiled, a horrifying expression on a thing never meant to smile. Child of shadow. Ilara's blood turned ice cold. The creature knew her. No, recognized her. Draven stepped slightly in front of her instinctively. The monster's golden eyes shifted toward him, and hatred flooded the chamber. Ashborne blood. The chains around its body rattled violently. Murderers. The shadow wolf snarled thunderously behind Alara. The colossal creature looked toward it slowly, then laughed. A terrible sound like mountains cracking apart. Little air. The words struck the shadow wolf itself like an insult. Suddenly Alara understood. This creature was older than the shadow bloodline, older than the first shadow queen, perhaps older than the kingdoms themselves. Draven's voice cut through the chamber sharply. What are you? The monster's golden eyes returned to him. I was your kingdom's first sin. Silence. Even the mountain seemed to still. The creature dragged itself higher from the abyss, chains snapping one by one beneath its immense strength. Your ancestors fed me shadow blood to create weapons for their war. Its gaze shifted toward Alara again. Instead, they created heirs. Cold horror spread through her body. The shadow bloodline, not born naturally, created, experimented into existence by desperate kings seeking power. The creature's voice deepened with ancient fury. Then they feared what they made. Another chain snapped violently. The entire chamber trembled. Draven stepped forward despite the impossible thing towering before them. What do you want? The monster looked at him almost curiously. Freedom. Then its gaze settled on Alara once more. And my daughter returned to me. The world seemed to stop breathing. My daughter returned to me. The words echoed through the underground chamber like a curse spoken by the mountain itself. Even the chains hanging from the creature's body fell silent for one terrible heartbeat. Ilara stared at the monster rising from the abyss. No. The denial left her mouth instantly, instinctively, because accepting the truth felt like stepping willingly into madness. The creature's golden eyes narrowed slowly. You carry my blood. The shadow wolf behind her snarled violently, black fur rippling with rage across the chamber darkness. Not submission, protection. The beast hated the thing beneath the mountain. That frightened Alara more than the monster's size ever could. Draven moved slightly closer to her, without taking his eyes off the creature. Ilara. His voice grounded her briefly. Warm, human, real. Unlike the ancient nightmare before them, the monster dragged another broken chain across the stone floor and pulled itself fully onto the platform surrounding the abyss. It was even larger than she realized. Scales, black as burnt bone, covered its body, while old silver brands carved across its flesh glowed faintly beneath torchlight. Massive claws scraped through stone effortlessly. The scent surrounding it carried blood, ancient magic, and centuries of hatred. And somehow, beneath all that horror, Ilara felt recognition, not memory. Blood. You're lying, she whispered. The creature tilted, its enormous head. Would you prefer the king's version of history instead? Another painful truth. Ashborne had buried lies beneath lies for centuries. The monster's gaze drifted toward Draven again. Your ancestors chained me beneath this mountain when their war ended. Its voice deepened with contempt. But they could not destroy my blood once it entered theirs. Cold realization spread through Ilara instantly. The shadow bloodline had never been separate from Ashborne. The royal bloodline itself carried traces of the same corruption. That was why Draven's curse reacted to her. Why their bond awakened ancient memories. They had been connected from the beginning. Draven understood it too. His expression darkened sharply. The kings used your blood during the blood wars. The creature smiled again. Yes. Another chain snapped violently from its body. Ronan raised his sword immediately. My king. The monster barely looked at him. The force of its attention alone sent Ronan crashing backward across the chamber hard enough to crack stone. Ilada Gaspid. Draven's sword flashed free instantly. Enough. The creature's golden eyes returned to him with mild amusement. You carry courage for a dying king. The words hit sharply. Draven's jaw tightened. You know about the curse. I know everything carried by my blood. The chamber grew colder. The creature studied Draven almost thoughtfully now. The poison accelerated what already existed inside your line. Ilara's pulse stumbled. Already existed. The royal curse had not begun with Seraphine's betrayal. It had always been there. Dormant. Waiting. The first kings bonded their bloodline to yours. Draven realized quietly. The creature's smile widened. To control shadow power. Its gaze sharpened dangerously. But blood cannot chain hunger forever. The truth settled heavily through the chamber. Ashborne's royal line had built its power by merging with forbidden blood. And now, both bloodlines were unraveling together. The shadow wolf growled again behind Ilara. The ancient creature finally looked directly at it. My beautiful mistake. The beast inside Ilara exploded with fury. Darkness surged violently through the chamber. Black smoke wrapped around her body while silver light ignited behind her eyes. Draven immediately stepped beside her. Ilara. The monster watched the reaction carefully. Protective, already. Its gaze lingered between them. Just like before. A memory struck Ilara instantly. A king kneeling before a shadow-marked woman beneath moonfire. Not war. Not violence. Love. Then blood. Execution. The vision shattered. Ilara staggered hard. Draven caught her instantly. The creature's golden eyes softened almost imperceptibly. You remember her. Who? Ilara whispered. The ancient monster looked toward the abyss behind it. The first daughter. Cold flooded her veins. The Shadow Queen. Not merely ancestor. Family. She wasn't a monster, Ilara said suddenly. The creature became still. No. The word echoed through the chamber with terrible grief. The kings made her one. Silence followed. Even Draven said nothing, because slowly, horrifyingly, the buried truth was taking shape. The Shadow Queen had not destroyed kingdoms out of madness alone. She had been betrayed, hunted, tortured, and eventually transformed by grief into something catastrophic. Just like the legends warned, the ancient creature lowered itself slightly, chains grinding against stone. You feel it already, don't you? Its gaze locked onto Ilara, the hunger after betrayal. Her breathing turned uneven, because yes, gods help her. Yes, every wound, every humiliation, every abandonment in her life fed the thing inside her. And tonight the court had nearly unleashed it completely. Draven stepped in front of her fully now. She is not you. The creature looked at him with ancient pity. No. Its golden eyes shifted back toward Ilara. She is worse. The words struck through the chamber like knives. The shadow wolf roared violently behind her. Draven's sword lifted instantly. Choose your next words carefully. The creature laughed softly, still protecting what terrifies you. Its gaze sharpened. You truly are Ashborne blood. Draven did not move, and suddenly, Ilara understood the terrifying difference between him and the kings before him. He knew she could destroy him, and he chose her anyway. The realization hurt more than fear ever could. The creature suddenly shifted its attention upward toward the ceiling far above them. Its expression darkened. They come. A distant horn echoed faintly through the mountain. Then another. Not from the palace. From outside Ashborne. The rival armies. Draven heard it too. The outer houses are moving. The creature's chains rattled slowly as it rose higher over the abyss. Of course they are. Its golden eyes gleamed darkly. Fear always breeds slaughter. Ronan struggled back to his feet, breathing hard. If the armies breach the gates while this thing is loose, thousands die. No one needed to say it aloud. The ancient creature looked toward Ilara once more. Come with me. The chamber went still. Draven's entire body tensed instantly. No. The creature ignored him completely. Leave these kingdoms to their lies and wars. Its voice softened, strangely. I can teach you what your blood truly is. Ilara's pulse shook violently. Part of her wanted to refuse instantly. But another part, the darker part, wanted answers. Wanted freedom from fear. The shadow wolf inside her listened carefully too. Draven sensed the hesitation immediately. Ilara. She looked toward him, and saw it clearly at last. Not kingly command. Not political calculation. Fear of losing her. The realization hit so hard it nearly stole breath from her lungs. The ancient creature noticed too. Its smile became knowing. The chains tighten already. Draven's silver eyes sharpened lethally. You don't get to speak about bonds. The creature's amusement vanished instantly. I know more about bonds than your bloodline ever deserved. Darkness rolled violently through the chamber. The chains around its body cracked further. And suddenly Ilara understood something horrifying. The creature was not merely imprisoned physically. The ancient mate bond between bloodlines had been part of the seal itself. A royal Ashborne line, connected to shadow blood. That was why the curse and the shadow wolf awakened together. Why the old visions centered around bonded lovers. And why the kingdom feared mate bonds so deeply. Because love itself had once nearly destroyed them all. Draven realized it too. His face hardened. The seal is weakening because of us. The creature's golden eyes gleamed. Yes, another violent tremor shook the mountain. Above them, distant screams echoed faintly from the palace levels. The rival armies had breached Ashbourne's outer gates. War had begun. The creature looked toward Ilara one final time. Choose carefully. Daughter of Shadow. Its gaze shifted coldly toward Draven. Because every Ashborne king eventually betrays what he loves most. The moment the creature spoke those words, the mountain shook hard enough to split the chamber floor. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ancient chains groaned beneath impossible strain. Far above them, battle horns screamed through the storm-dark night as Ashbourne's outer defenses finally collapsed. War had reached the palace. Ronan cursed sharply and pressed one hand against the stone wall to steady himself. The lower city's fallen. Draven didn't look away from the ancient creature. Not yet, but even he sounded less certain now. The monster towering above the abyss watched them with ancient patience, golden eyes burning through darkness like twin suns buried beneath the mountain. Every Ashborne king eventually betrays what he loves most. The words lodged themselves deep inside Ilara's chest, because part of her believed them, not because of Draven, because history already had. Again and again, kings chose crowns over love, power over mercy, survival over loyalty. The Shadow Queen learned that truth in blood. And if the stories were true, so would she. The shadow wolf inside her stirred uneasily. Not angry. Wounded. Draven stepped fully in front of her now. Silver eyes fixed on the creature with dangerous calm. You speak as though betrayal is inevitable. The ancient beast tilted its massive head slowly. Isn't it? Its chains dragged across the stone with a sound like grinding graves. Your ancestors betrayed my bloodline. Their queens, their mates, even themselves. Its gaze sharpened. And one day, you will betray her too. The chamber fell deathly still. Ilara's pulse thundered unevenly. She should have looked away. Should have remembered he was still a king born from the bloodline that destroyed hers. Instead, she found herself watching Draven, waiting. The Alpha King of Ashborne stood unmoving beneath the flickering torchlight. Dark armor streaked with blood and shadow while distant war cries echoed through the mountain halls behind them. For one terrible heartbeat, he looked exactly like the kings from her visions. Then he spoke. No. The word cracked through the chamber with absolute certainty. Not hesitation. Not promise. Decision. The ancient creature's golden eyes narrowed. Draven's voice lowered dangerously. My ancestors chained monsters beneath mountains because they feared losing control. His gaze sharpened. I'm not them. The creature laughed softly. Every king believes that at first. Draven ignored the taunt completely. Instead, he looked toward Alara, and suddenly the entire chamber seemed to narrow around them. The war outside faded. The monster disappeared. There was only the king and the girl, carrying the kingdom's deadliest bloodline. You asked what happens if the beast takes you completely, he said quietly. Ilara's breath caught. Draven stepped closer. Then I stay. The word struck harder than any oath, because no one had ever stayed before. Not for her. Not when things became dangerous. The shadow wolf inside her became utterly still. Listening. Feeling. The ancient creature watched silently now. Curious. Ilara's throat tightened painfully. You don't know what I could become. No, Draven admitted, but I know what you already chose. Images flashed through his mind, and somehow into hers, through the bond, tightening painfully between them. The dying werewolf in the hall. Seraphine spared despite betrayal. Mercy shone while transformed into something feared by kingdoms. Draven's voice roughened slightly. You had every reason to become cruel. His eyes held hers steadily. And you didn't. Something inside Alara cracked. Not the monster. The loneliness. The years spent believing survival required becoming smaller, quieter, emptier than everyone around her. Draven saw all of it, and remained anyway. The ancient creature studied them carefully before speaking again. Love always sounds noble before blood spills. Its gaze shifted toward the ceiling above, and blood comes quickly now. A deafening explosion thundered through the mountain. Stone cracked violently somewhere above them. Screams echoed faintly downward through the tunnels. Ronan's face darkened. The inner gates. Draven turned instantly toward the stairwell. They reached the palace. The creature smiled. There it is. Its golden eyes gleamed toward Alara. The first choice between kingdom and bond. Draven's jaw tightened sharply. Because the monster was right. If rival armies reached the throne halls and discovered Alara here, panic would become massacre. The northern kingdoms would slaughter anyone carrying shadow blood. And if Alara lost control in the middle of battle, thousands could die. The ancient creature's voice softened almost mockingly. What will you sacrifice first, Ashborne king? The throne? Or her? Silence crashed through the chamber. Even Ronan looked toward Draven now, waiting. Because this was the moment kingdoms were built upon. The impossible choice. Ilara stepped back slowly. I can leave. Draven turned sharply toward her. If I disappear now, she whispered, the armies might stand down. No, you don't know that. I know predators, he said coldly. And those men didn't march through a blizzard for peace. The truth settled heavily. The rival houses came for weakness. If Alara vanished, they would simply demand more. A weaker king. A new ruler. More blood. The creature laughed softly again. Now you understand. Its chains rattled as another snapped loose. Fear never ends with surrender. The shadow wolf growled low inside Alara's chest. Agreeing. Because beasts understood what prey often refused to learn. Running rarely stopped hunters. Another violent tremor shook the chamber. Then suddenly, a scream echoed down the stairwell. Ooman. Close. Ronan spun instantly. A wounded guard stumbled into view moments later, covered in blood. My king. Something massive burst from the darkness behind him. Claws tore through the guard's chest before he finished speaking. Blood sprayed across the stairs. A corrupted shadow beast lunged into the chamber, snarling wildly. Then another. Then 5 more behind it. The creatures were fleeing, not hunting, running from something. The ancient monster's expression darkened instantly. It comes. The corrupted beasts scrambled desperately around the chamber edges, whimpering like terrified animals. Alara felt it next. A presence. Immense. Ancien. Wrong. Not shadow. Something colder. The shadow wolf exploded behind her defensively. Draven drew his sword again immediately. What now? The ancient creature's golden eyes lifted slowly toward the tunnel darkness. The king's final weapon. Cold spread through Alara's veins. Another roar echoed from the stairwell. This one sounded metallic, inhuman. Then, heavy footsteps began descending toward them. Slow, deliberate. The corrupted shadow beasts started screaming. Not roaring, screaming. And from the darkness above, silver light appeared, bright enough to burn the shadows from the chamber walls. The ancient creature bared its enormous teeth. Its voice deepened into hatred older than kingdoms. They awakened the Moon Eater. The silver light grew brighter, with every step descending the stairwell. Not torchlight, not moonlight. Something colder. Sacred. Wrong. The corrupted shadow beasts threw themselves against the chamber walls in blind panic, clawing desperately at stone, as if trying to escape through solid mountain itself. Their screams echoed through the abyss chamber like dying animals before slaughter. The shadow wolf behind Alara lowered into a defensive crouch, terrified. The realization hit her like ice water. Nothing had ever frightened the beast before. Not silver chains. Not armies. Not even the ancient creature rising from the abyss. But whatever approached now, the shadow wolf remembered it. Draven stepped directly beside Alara, sword raised while silver veins pulsed faintly beneath the skin of his hand, where the curse stirred violently. Ronan moved toward the stair entrance with the remaining guards, though fear was written plainly across every face now. Then the footsteps stopped. Silence swallowed the chamber, and a figure stepped from the silver light. At first, Alara thought it was a man. Then it moved. Too smooth, too still. Its body was wrapped entirely in ancient silver armor carved with moon symbols older than Ashborne itself. Chains hung from its shoulders like ceremonial robes, while a massive blade rested across one gauntleted hand. No skin showed beneath the armor, only silver light burning through the cracks. The thing had no scent, no heartbeat, no life, and yet it stood there watching them, watching her. The ancient creature behind the abyss chains growled deeply. The Moon Eater. The armored figure tilted its head slowly toward the creature, then spoke. Its voice sounded like steel dragged across bones. Shadow corruption detected. Every torch in the chamber dimmed instantly. The corrupted beasts began screaming louder. One lunged suddenly toward the stairwell in blind terror. The silver figure moved once. The massive sword flashed downward. The creature vanished. Not killed. Erased. Shadow and flesh dissolved into silver ash before the remains even touched the ground. The chamber fell silent in horror. Alara's stomach twisted violently. That thing did not fight monsters. It annihilated them. The Moon Eater's burning gaze shifted toward her. Unknown bloodline confirmed. The shadow wolf roared behind Alara instantly. Silver light exploded outward from the armored figure in response. The two ancient powers collided hard enough to crack the chamber walls. Draven stepped between them immediately. She's under my protection. The Moon Eater turned its faceless helm slowly toward him. Ashborne bloodline compromised. The ancient creature laughed darkly from behind its broken chains. See how quickly your kingdom turns against you? The Moon Eater ignored it completely. Its burning silver gaze remained fixed on Draven. Final protocol initiated. Then the ancient thing lifted its sword fully. Ronan cursed sharply. It's targeting the king. The Moon Eater attacked. Faster than thought. The silver blade crashed toward Draven, carrying enough force to split stone apart. He intercepted it barely in time, steel screaming violently against sacred silver. The impact blasted him backward across the chamber. Alara shouted instinctively. The shadow wolf exploded forward in fury. Massive black claws slammed into the Moon Eater, hard enough to crack its armor. But the silver figure didn't even stagger. Instead, moonlight burst from the damaged armor plates like burning fire. The shadow wolf screamed, actually screamed. Smoke poured from its claws, where silver light touched shadow flesh. The Moon Eater raised one hand calmly. Ancient moonfire chains erupted from the floor, instantly wrapping around the shadow wolf's throat and limbs. The colossal beast crashed violently against the stone. Trapped, Ilara felt the agony tear through her own body. She dropped hard to one knee, gasping. Draven reached her immediately. "Ilara!" The Moon-Eater turned toward them again. Primary target identified. Its sword lifted toward Ilara. Ronan shouted for the guards. Silver spears flew. The Moon-Eater barely acknowledged them. Moonlight exploded outward in a violent pulse. Every guard was thrown backward instantly. Armor shattered. Blood sprayed across the chamber floor. Ronan hit the wall hard enough to crack stone. Draven stood alone between Ilara and the ancient weapon now. The Moon-Eater studied him silently. Then, royal bloodline deviation confirmed. Draven's silver eyes narrowed. "What are you?" The thing answered without emotion. Final containment construct of the first Moon Temple. Cold realization spread through the chamber. Not alive. Built. A weapon forged specifically to exterminate shadow bloodlines. The ancient creature snarled from the abyss. They feared losing control of me. So they built that abomination from moonfire and dead gods. The Moon-Eater raised its sword again. Containment failure requires purge protocol. The shadow wolf fought violently against its chains. The ancient creature strained against its own restraints. Everything in the chamber was unraveling. Ilara forced herself upright, despite the pain ripping through her body. "Why now?" she demanded toward the construct. "Why awaken after centuries?" The silver helm turned toward her. Mate bond convergence triggered awakening. Her blood went cold. The bond, not just between her and Draven, between their bloodlines themselves. The old kingdoms had prepared for this exact possibility. If shadow blood and Ashborne blood fully reconnected, the Moon-Eater awakened automatically to destroy both. Draven understood instantly. "It's here to kill us." Correction. The construct's voice remained perfectly empty. "It is here to preserve the world." The chamber shook violently as another chain snapped from the ancient creature's body. The Moon-Eater ignored it completely. All focus remained on Ilara, and suddenly she understood why. Not because she was dangerous alone, because she was becoming something worse. The shadow bloodline reunited with Ashborne blood could fully awaken whatever ancient power the first kings tried to bury. The Moon-Eater lifted its sword toward her chest. Execution required. Draven moved instantly in front of her. "No." The construct paused. Royal line interference detected. "Then detect this," Draven growled. His curse erupted. Silver-black veins exploded across his skin, while wolf eyes burned violently beneath the torchlight. Shadow and moonlight collided through his body simultaneously, as centuries of corrupted blood awakened fully for the first time. The chamber shook. Even the Moon-Eater paused. Anomaly escalating. The ancient creature behind the abyss stared in sudden fascination. The shadow wolf stopped fighting its chains. Watching. Draven's breathing turned ragged as power tore through him violently. His wolf form tried to emerge beneath skin already corrupted by both bloodlines. Ilara grabbed his arm instantly. "Draven." The moment she touched him, everything exploded. Darkness and silver light collided through the chamber in a catastrophic wave. The shadow wolf shattered its restraints instantly. The Moon-Eater staggered backward for the first time, and between Ilara and Draven, a symbol ignited. A massive moon mark burning black and silver across both their skin. The ancient creature's golden eyes widened. "Impossible." The Moon-Eater's voice finally changed. Not emotion. Alarm. Ancient bond restoration detected. The mark blazed brighter. Visions crashed through Ilara's mind, violently. The Shadow Queen standing beside an Ashborne king beneath moonfire. Not enemies. Lovers. A promise spoken before war destroyed everything. "If the world turns against you, I will stand beside you until the last kingdom burns." Then betrayal. Chain. Murder. The vision shattered. Ilara gasped hard. Draven stared at the glowing mark across their joined hands, with stunned realization. The ancient creature looked almost afraid now, because something long buried had just awakened fully. And the Moon Eater, the unstoppable weapon built to destroy shadow blood, took one step backward. The glowing mark burned across their skin like living fire. Black and silver intertwined. Shadow and moonlight fused together beneath flesh that should have rejected each other completely. The chamber had gone silent. Even the mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. The Moon Eater stared at the mark with unnatural stillness, silver light flickering unevenly beneath its armor for the first time since awakening. Ancient bond restoration detected. Its voice no longer sounded emotionless. It sounded uncertain. The ancient creature chained above the abyss lowered its massive head slowly, golden eyes fixed on Alara and Draven, with something dangerously close to awe. The first bond. The shadow wolf behind Alara stepped closer instinctively now, no longer snarling at Draven or the ancient creature. The beast recognized the mark, remembered it, and somewhere inside Alara, memories not her own began rising like blood through water. A queen with black veins smiling beneath moonlight, an Ashborne king kneeling before her, not in submission. Devotion. Their hands joined beneath the same burning symbol, the world trembling around them. Then screaming. Betrayal. Execution fires. The memory shattered violently. Alara staggered. Draven caught her immediately, his hand still locked against hers where the mark burned brightest. The moment he touched her fully again, the pain inside both of them eased, not disappeared, balanced. The realization hit Draven visibly. His curse had quieted completely, for the first time in years. Alara felt it too. The shadow wolf was no longer tearing at her mind. It had become calm, whole. The ancient creature laughed softly from the abyss chamber. They failed after all. The Moon Eater turned sharply toward it. Containment integrity compromised. The creature's chains rattled darkly. You were built to destroy the bond before it awakened again. Its golden gaze shifted toward Alara and Draven. And now you are too late. The Moon Eater raised its sword instantly. Emergency purge. Authorized. Silver light exploded through the chamber. The construct moved faster than before, sacred moonfire pouring from its armor, while the massive blade swung directly toward Alara. Draven intercepted it head-on. Steel screamed against silver. The impact shattered the floor beneath them. But this time, Draven did not get thrown backward. Darkness surged around his sword as the bond mark blazed brighter between him and Alara. The Moon Eater froze briefly, shadow integration accelerating. Ronan shouted from across the chamber, struggling back to his feet. "What does that mean?" The ancient creature answered instead. "It means your king is becoming something new." Draven's silver eyes flashed violently. Not fully wolf anymore. Not fully human. Shadow curled through the air around him, while moonlight pulsed beneath his skin. The ancient bloodlines were merging completely now. The Moon Eater attacked again, and this time Alara moved beside him. The shadow wolf erupted forward in colossal form, while darkness exploded from Alara's outstretched hand. Black moonfire slammed into the construct hard enough to crack its silver armor across the chest. The chamber shook violently. The Moon Eater staggered. The impossible finally happened. The ancient weapon bled. Liquid silver poured slowly from the cracks in its armor. The construct looked down at the damage in silence, then toward Alara. Adaptive corruption confirmed. Its sword lifted again, threat level revised. The silver light intensifying around its body suddenly became blinding. The ancient creature snarled sharply. It's preparing a full purge. Cold fear struck Alara instantly. What does that mean? The creature's golden eyes darkened. Everything dies. The Moon Eater raised both hands toward the ceiling. Moon symbols across the ancient chamber ignited one after another. Silver fire spread through the walls. The entire mountain trembled. Far above them, screams echoed through Ashborne as moonlight erupted from the palace foundations themselves. The construct was activating every ancient seal beneath the kingdom. Destroying the shadow bloodline was no longer enough. It intended to erase all corrupted blood, completely, including Draven. The realization hit Alara violently. No, The shadow wolf roared in agreement. Draven looked toward the blazing moon symbols across the chamber walls, then toward the ancient creature, still chained above the abyss. How do we stop it? The creature smiled grimly. You don't. Another chain snapped from its body. The construct was drawing power directly from the ancient seals, imprisoning the creature beneath the mountain. The more power it used, the weaker the prison became. The Moon Eater's voice echoed across the chamber. Global shadow contamination requires extinction event. Ronan swore violently. It's going to collapse the entire mountain. Not just the mountain. Ilara suddenly understood. The old moon seals beneath Ashborne, connected across the northern territories. Ancient containment networks. If the construct activated all of them, every trace of shadow blood across the kingdoms would die. Children, hidden bloodlines, entire villages descended from forgotten survivors. Genocide. Again. The ancient creature watched her realization carefully. Now, you understand what your ancestors truly built. Draven's expression hardened into something lethal. No. The construct turned toward him. Opposition irrelevant. Draven lifted his sword slowly. The black-silver mark across his hand burned brighter. You made one mistake, he said coldly. The Moon Eater paused. Draven's gaze shifted briefly toward Ilara. You assumed I'd protect the kingdom before I protected her. The words struck through the chamber harder than battle ever could. The ancient creature went utterly still. The shadow wolf lifted its head proudly behind Ilara, and somewhere deep inside the bond between them, something ancient healed. The Moon Eater attacked. Draven met it head-on. This time shadow and moonlight exploded together around him as his transformed power fully awakened. The construct's silver blade collided against blackened steel, carrying the weight of centuries. The chamber shattered around them. Stone pillars cracked apart. Ancient chains snapped loose. The abyss beneath the mountain roared violently. Ilara joined him instantly. Darkness surged around her body as the shadow wolf merged partially, with her form's silver eyes blazing, black claws cutting through moonfire itself. Together, they drove the Moon Eater backward. Not king and monster. Not curse and weapon. Partners. The construct staggered under the combined force of shadow and moonlight fused together. Impossible. Its voice finally carried fear. The ancient creature laughed thunderously. Not impossible. Its golden eyes gleamed toward Ilara and Draven. Just forgotten. The Moon Eater suddenly unleashed a massive burst of silver fire. The explosion blasted through the chamber hard enough to throw Ronan and the guards from their feet. Stone ceilings collapsed. Ancient seals shattered. And above the abyss, the final chain binding the ancient creature snapped completely. Silence fell. The colossal monster slowly rose to its full height for the first time in centuries. Free. The sound of the final chain breaking echoed through the abyss like the end of an age. Every remaining moon seal across the chamber shattered at once. Silver light died violently from the walls. Ancient runes cracked apart beneath centuries of pressure finally released. The entire mountain groaned as though Ashborne itself understood what had just awakened beneath its foundations. The creature rose slowly from the abyss. No longer crouched. No longer restrained. Free. It towered above them like something pulled from the nightmares of dead kingdoms. Black scales gleaming beneath broken torchlight, while shattered chains dragged from its body like the remains of forgotten wars. And now that nothing restrained its power, Ilara could finally feel what it truly was. Not merely monster. Not beast. Something far older. The shadow wolf lowered its massive head instinctively. Not in fear. Reverence. The realization hit Ilara hard enough to steal breath from her lungs. The creature beneath the mountain had once been worshipped. The Moon Eater staggered backward for the first time since awakening. Containment failure catastrophic. Its silver light flickered violently now, unstable without the ancient seals feeding it power. The ancient being looked down at the construct with ancient hatred burning behind golden eyes. You were forged from stolen moonfire and dead souls. Its voice shook the chamber walls, and still they feared me more. The Moon Eater raised its blade immediately. Threat level. Extinction. The creature smiled, then moved. No one saw the impact. One moment the construct stood across the chamber surrounded by silver fire. The next, the ancient being's claw closed around its throat. The floor exploded beneath the force. The Moon Eater slammed hard against the stone wall, silver armor cracking violently under black claws. Impossible. The ancient creature leaned closer, slowly. Your kings built you from fear. Its golden eyes narrowed. Fear never defeats hunger. Then it crushed the construct through solid stone. The entire chamber erupted. Silver light exploded outward in catastrophic waves. Ancient walls collapsed. Fire tore across the abyss, while moonfire chains burst apart like dying stars. Draven grabbed Alara instantly and pulled her behind shattered pillars as debris rained through the cavern. Ronan shouted for the surviving guards to retreat. Too late. The chamber ceiling began collapsing. The ancient being roared upward through the destruction, not in pain. Freedom. Centuries of rage rolled through the mountain hard enough to shake Ashborne Palace above them. Far overhead, war horns abruptly stopped. Even the armies outside had felt it. The Moon Eater emerged from the rubble again, damaged, broken, but still moving. Silver fluid poured from shattered armor plates, while moonlight pulsed erratically beneath its cracked form. Final pour. The construct's voice glitched violently. Must continue. The ancient creature turned slowly toward it. Persistent little weapon. Then suddenly, the construct's silver gaze locked onto Alara. Primary convergence source identified. Its damaged sword lifted toward her. Target elimination required. Draven moved instantly. The construct attacked. Silver fire exploded through the chamber in a wave, powerful enough to vaporize stone itself. Draven intercepted the strike directly with blackened steel and shadow fire, and the impact nearly killed him. Alara felt it through the bond instantly. Pain ripped through her chest as Draven crashed hard against collapsed pillars, blood spraying across the ruins. Draven. The shadow wolf roared violently. The ancient creature's golden eyes sharpened. Interesting. The Moon Eater advanced toward Draven slowly. Royal bloodline collapse imminent. Alara moved before thought. Darkness exploded from her body completely. The shadow wolf merged fully with her at last. Black claws tore through stone beneath her feet, while silver-black moonfire erupted across her skin like armor. Her eyes burned bright enough to illuminate the shattered chamber. The ancient creature watched silently now, not interfering, watching what she would become. The Moon Eater swung toward her instantly. Alara caught the blade bare-handed. The entire chamber froze. Silver fire screamed against black claws. But this time, the moonfire did not burn her. The bond mark across her skin blazed violently. Shadow and moonlight had stopped fighting each other. They had become one thing. The construct's silver gaze flickered. Impossible adaptation. Alara's voice emerged, layered with the shadow wolf's growl. You were built to kill monsters. Darkness spread up the construct's blade where her claws touched it. But I was born from one. Then, she shattered the sword. The explosion of silver steel blasted through the chamber like thunder. The Moon Eater staggered backward in visible shock for the first time. Threat. Escalation. Alara attacked. Fast. Too fast. The shadow wolf moved with her now, instead of inside her. Colossal black form tearing through the ruins beside her, as shadow fire crashed into the construct from both sides. The Moon Eater fought back desperately. Silver chains erupted from the ground. Moonfire spears filled the air. Ancient seals ignited one final time across the chamber walls. But Alara broke through all of it. Not because she was stronger, because she had stopped fearing herself. The realization hit her suddenly during the battle. The kings created monsters because they feared losing control. The Moon Eater existed because fear demanded extermination. The Shadow Queen destroyed kingdoms because betrayal consumed her. But Alara still had a choice. The Shadow Wolf roared beside her in approval. Not hunger now. Acceptance. The Moon Eater raised both hands desperately. Emergency divine protocol. The ancient creature suddenly slammed into it from behind. Massive claws tore straight through silver armor. The construct convulsed violently. Ancient moonfire exploded from the wounds. The being leaned close beside the construct's shattered helm. "Your age is over." Then it ripped the Moon Eater apart. Silver light detonated across the chamber. The construct screamed, not mechanically, humanly. For one horrifying moment, Ilara saw faces trapped inside the silver fire. Souls. The dead souls used to forge the weapon centuries ago. The first kings had sacrificed their own people to create the Moon Eater. The construct disintegrated in a storm of silver ash. Silence crashed through the ruins. Only the sound of collapsing stone remained. The ancient being stood over the ashes, breathing slowly now, golden eyes fixed on Ilara. Free. The word echoed gently through her mind. But freedom carried danger. She understood that immediately. Because now nothing beneath Ashborne restrained this creature anymore. Draven forced himself upright through blood and shattered stone. "Ilara." She turned instantly toward him. The bond between them pulsed violently. Alive. Still alive. Relief nearly brought her to her knees. The ancient creature watched the reaction carefully. Love again. Its voice carried old grief. Always the sharpest chain. Ronan staggered toward them through the ruins. The mountains collapsing. Above them, cracks spread rapidly through the chamber ceiling. Ashborne itself was beginning to fail without the ancient seals supporting its foundations. The creature looked upward calmly. "The kingdom dies tonight." Cold fear spread instantly through Ilara. "No." The being's golden eyes returned to her. "Would you save the throne built upon your bloodline's slaughter?" The question cut deep, because part of her wanted to let it all burn. The palace, the council, the kingdom that chained children beneath mountains and called it protection. But then she thought of the lower city, the servants, the innocent, the frightened wolves outside who inherited sins they never committed, and Draven, standing bloodied beside her, despite every reason to choose his throne instead. Ilara lifted her gaze slowly. "No," she whispered. "I'll save the people." The ancient creature became very still. Then slowly, it smiled. At last, its massive gaze shifted toward Draven, a king worth loving. The mountain trembled violently again. The creature looked back toward the abyss. "The old seals are gone. This place cannot survive." Draven's expression hardened instantly. "Can it be stopped?" The being studied Ilara one final time. "Yes." Silence. "Then, but it will require the blood of both lines willingly joined." The bond mark across Ilara's skin burned painfully bright, and suddenly she understood the price before anyone spoke it aloud. The mountain groaned like a dying beast. Stone split apart overhead in violent cracks, while ancient tunnels collapsed deeper beneath Ashborne. Dust and burning moonfire filled the shattered chamber. Somewhere above them, thousands of people were still trapped inside a kingdom built over buried nightmares. And now the kingdom itself was falling into the abyss. The ancient being watched Ilara and Draven silently, while the bond mark across their skin burned brighter with every heartbeat. The price had already been chosen. Ilara understood it instinctively. The old bloodlines were never meant to exist separately. Shadow and Moonfire had once been one power before kings split them apart through fear, war, and betrayal. And now the mountain demanded balance returned. "What does willingly joined mean?" Draven asked coldly. The creature's golden eyes shifted toward him. "A true bond." Silence settled heavily. Not political claim. Not forced lunar rights. Not survival. Choice. The ancient being lowered itself slowly before them, massive chains dragging across broken stone. "The first kings severed the old bond between our bloodlines to weaken shadow power." Its gaze settled on Ilara. That betrayal shattered more than kingdoms. Then toward Draven. It poisoned love itself with fear. The truth hit painfully deep. The mate bond between their bloodlines had once been sacred. The old kings turned it into something feared, something hunted. The mountain shook violently again. Large sections of ceiling collapsed into the abyss behind them. Ronan stepped back sharply. We're out of time. The ancient being nodded once. If the bond is restored willingly, the mountain seals can be reborn. Ilara's pulse became uneven. And if we refuse? The creature's expression darkened. Ashborne falls. The shadow corruption spreads through the northern territories, and eventually, its golden eyes sharpened. Everything becomes hunger. The shadow wolf stirred uneasily beside her. Not disagreement. Recognition. The ancient being wasn't threatening them. It was warning them. Draven looked toward the collapsing abyss, then the shattered remains of the Moon-Eater scattered across the chamber floor. Thousands above. Entire kingdoms beyond. Then, his gaze returned to Ilara, and suddenly the world narrowed around them again. Not king and monster. Not bloodlines and prophecy. Just two broken people standing inside the ruins of everyone else's mistakes. Ilara's throat tightened painfully. You shouldn't have to choose this. Draven stepped closer through the falling ash. I already did. The words landed softly. Absolutely. Ilara stared at him. You barely know me. A faint shadow crossed his expression. That stopped mattering a long time ago. The bond between them pulsed sharply at the admission. Because it was true. Somewhere between the throne hall, the war wolves, the betrayals, and the blood, they had stopped belonging only to themselves. The shadow wolf lowered itself quietly beside them, waiting. The ancient being watched with ancient sadness behind golden eyes. The first pair loved each other too. A memory flickered briefly through Ilara's mind. A queen with black veins laughing softly, while an Ashborne king pressed his forehead against hers beneath moonlight. Peace. Then, fire. Execution. Shah. The memory vanished. Draven noticed her expression immediately. What did you see? The first bond. The ancient being closed its eyes briefly. They tried to save each other. Its voice lowered into grief older than kingdoms. But fear reached the throne before love did. Silence followed, because every person in the chamber understood the warning hidden beneath those words. History repeated itself through cowardice. The mountain trembled again. Ronan suddenly cursed sharply and pointed upward. The cracks spreading through the ceiling had reached the upper foundations. We have minutes left. Draven looked toward Ilara fully now. No fear, no hesitation, only certainty. The Alpha King of Ashborne reached for her hand carefully despite the black claws still partially covering her skin. You once asked me if I made you Luna out of mercy. Ilara's breathing shook. Draven's scarred fingers intertwined with hers. It was never mercy. The bond mark ignited violently. Shadow and moonlight swirled around them in spirals of black-silver fire. The ancient being lowered its head slowly. Witnessed. The word echoed through the chamber like ancient law awakening. The shadow wolf rose behind Ilara. Not monstrous now. Majestic. Its silver eyes remained fixed on Draven, with calm recognition. Mate. The word entered both their minds simultaneously. Not command. Truth. Ilara felt tears burn unexpectedly behind her eyes, because no one had ever chosen her freely before. Not without fear. Not without condition. Draven stepped closer until their foreheads nearly touched beneath the collapsing mountain. You are not the kingdom's curse, he whispered. The words shattered something inside her completely. Years of chains. Humiliation. Being treated like something dangerous, before she even understood why. And here stood the one man who had every reason to fear her, choosing her anyway. The mountain roared around them. The ancient being spoke one final time. Then seal the bond willingly, or lose everything. Ilara looked into Draven's silver eyes, saw exhaustion there, bine, loneliness, and devotion sharp enough to terrify kings. Her answer came quietly. Certain? Yes. The moment the word left her lips, the bond awakened fully. Darkness and moonfire exploded through the chamber. The mark spread across both their bodies in glowing patterns of black and silver. The shadow wolf roared upward while moonlight burst from the shattered ceiling above Ashborne Palace itself. Every wolf across the kingdom felt it instantly. The true mate bond had returned. The ancient being rose slowly, as the power surged around them. At last, the chamber floor cracked apart beneath the force of awakening magic. Draven pulled Alara against him instinctively, while shadow and moonlight spiraled together around their joined bodies. Then suddenly, the bond reached deeper, past them, into the mountain itself. Ancient moon seals hidden beneath Ashborne ignited one after another. Not silver anymore. Black and silver together. Balanced. The collapsing foundations began stabilizing. Stone repaired itself beneath waves of ancient power. Broken walls sealed shut. The abyss beneath the mountain trembled violently as the reborn magic spread outward through the old kingdom. Above them, the screams from the palace stopped. The mountain was healing. The ancient being smiled faintly, watching the rebirth spread through the chamber. Then its massive body began dissolving into black ash. Ilara's eyes widened. Wait. Its golden gaze settled on her one last time. I was never meant to survive freedom. Pain twisted unexpectedly through her chest. You're my father. The being's expression softened with ancient sorrow. No. Its voice gentled. Only your beginning. Then, its gaze shifted toward Draven. Protect her better than we protected each other. Draven bowed his head once. A king's promise. The ancient being looked toward Alara again. Break the cycle. The word settled deep inside her soul. Then the creature dissolved completely into shadow and moonlight. Gone. Silence followed. The shadow wolf lifted its head and howled once toward the collapsing darkness above. Not rage. Mourning. Alara closed her eyes briefly. Then suddenly, another horn echoed from above the mountain. War horns. The rival armies. Ronan swore under his breath. The outer houses are still attacking. Of course they were. They had no idea what just happened beneath Ashborne. To them, the kingdom still looked weak, still looked vulnerable. Draven slowly turned toward the stairwell, leading back to the palace above. The black-silver bond mark still glowed faintly beneath his skin now. No longer curse. No longer corruption. Power. Balanced. Alive. He looked toward Alara, and for the first time since she met him, the weight of pain inside his eyes was gone. What now? She asked softly. A slow, dangerous smile finally touched the Alpha King's mouth. Now, he said, we remind the northern kingdoms who this mountain belongs to. Dawn had not yet reached Ashborne when they emerged from beneath the mountain, but the kingdom already looked transformed. Snowstorms spiraled violently around the palace towers, while black and silver moonfire pulsed beneath the stone streets like veins awakening beneath skin. The shattered sections of the lower fortress had begun repairing themselves through ancient magic reborn from the restored bond. And above the northern walls, war banners still waited. Thousands of soldiers surrounded Ashborne beneath the blizzard darkness. Torches stretched endlessly across the mountain slopes, while rival alpha houses prepared siege weapons outside the broken gates. They came expecting weakness. Instead, the mountain itself had awakened. The moment Draven and Alara stepped onto the upper battlements, every wolf in the palace turned toward them instantly. Silence spread through the corridors. Guards lowered weapons unconsciously. Servants froze mid-step, because the bond between them could now be felt physically, not merely magic. Authority. Ancien. Primal. The Black Luna had risen. Ronan reached the battlements moments later, still covered in blood and dust from the fighting below. The moment he saw them fully, his expression changed. Not fear this time. Recognition. The king's curse was gone. The black veins once hidden beneath Draven's skin had vanished entirely, replaced by faint silver-black markings glowing subtly beneath his throat and hands. Balanced. The shadow blood and Ashborne blood had finally stopped tearing each other apart. Ronan exhaled slowly. The mountain stopped collapsing. Draven's gaze remained fixed on the armies below. The outer gates? Still holding. Ronan hesitated. Barely. Alara stepped beside the battlement edge. The shadow wolf moved silently behind her now, no longer unstable or monstrous. Its massive form flowed through darkness like living moonlight, while silver eyes watched the armies below with calm dominance. The soldiers outside noticed it immediately. Panic spread visibly through the front lines. Whispers moved through the gathered armies like wildfire. Black Luna. Shadow Queen. Monster. Draven lifted one hand slightly. Every Ashborne guard along the walls straightened instantly. Not fear. Instinctive loyalty. The restored bond had strengthened the entire royal bloodline connected to the mountain itself. The kingdom recognized its rulers again. Far below, a horn sounded from the rival armies. A white banner emerged through the snowfall. Parley. Ronan's expression darkened. Cowards smell uncertainty now that the gates didn't fall. No, Draven said calmly. They smell survival. The difference mattered. A delegation approached the outer bridge shortly after sunrise. 3 rival alphas crossed the snow-covered pass, flanked by armed escorts beneath banners, snapping violently in the wind. House Vero, House Adric, the Eastern Mountain clans. The same rulers who demanded Ilara surrendered hours earlier. Now they looked uncertain. Good. Draven descended to the outer throne courtyard with Ilara beside him while Ashborne guards lined the black stone walls above. Snow drifted heavily between the gathered armies as the rival alphas approached slowly across the bridge. Every eye locked onto Ilara immediately. The black-silver markings across her throat glowed faintly beneath moonlight, while the shadow wolf prowled silently behind her. No chains now. No fear. The difference unsettled them more than her transformation ever had. Lord Vero stepped forward first, broad shoulders stiff beneath crimson furs. King Draven, he called across the courtyard. We came seeking answers. No, Draven replied coldly. You came seeking weakness. The older alpha's jaw tightened. Around him, the rival escorts shifted uneasily beneath the pressure rolling through Ashbourne's courtyard, because the mountain itself felt alive now. Watching. Protective. Vero's gaze shifted toward Ilara carefully. The northern houses cannot ignore forbidden shadow blood awakened inside the royal court. The shadow wolf growled softly. Several soldiers stepped backward instantly. Ilara remained silent. She no longer needed to defend herself through words. Draven stepped slightly closer beside her. She is my Luna, he said evenly. And under my protection. Vero's expression hardened. Your protection may no longer matter if the northern territories unite against you. A dangerous silence followed. Then, Draven smiled. Not kindly. The rival alphas visibly stiffened. Tr. The single word rolled through the courtyard like distant thunder. Every wolf present felt it. Dominance. Absolute. But before tension could explode further, another voice echoed from the battlements above. Enough. The entire courtyard turned. Lord Cadron descended slowly from the palace stairs, supported by his black cane, pale and exhausted after the chaos of the night. But his eyes remained sharp. The rival alphas frowned immediately. You support this? Vero demanded. Cadron stopped beside the throne platform and looked toward Ilara for a long moment, then toward the gathered armies. The northern kingdoms buried truth beneath fear for centuries, he said quietly. And last night we nearly destroyed ourselves repeating that mistake. Shock spread visibly across the rival delegates. Cadron continued before anyone interrupted. The shadow bloodline was not born to destroy kingdoms. His gaze hardened. It was created by desperate kings seeking weapons. Murmurs erupted instantly through the gathered soldiers. Vero stared in disbelief. What are you saying? The truth, Cadron replied tiredly. Far too late. The old counselor looked toward Ilara fully now. We hunted children because we feared our own sins. His voice lowered. No more. Silence followed. The weight of those words spread through the courtyard heavier than battle ever could, because kingdoms could survive monsters easier than truth. Vero's expression darkened uncertainly. Even if that's true, shadow blood still threatens the north. No, Ilara said softly. Every gaze shifted toward her instantly. Snow swirled through the courtyard around black moonfire glowing faintly beneath her skin. The fear of it does. The shadow wolf moved beside her silently. Calm, controlled, not the mindless horror they expected. Ilara stepped forward slowly. I spent my life chained because kingdoms feared what I might become. Her silver-gray eyes swept across the gathered armies. And last night your fear nearly awakened exactly that. No one interrupted, because every person present remembered the stories. The wars, the destruction. Ilara's voice remained steady. You fear monsters, because your kings taught you monsters deserve chains. Her gaze sharpened. But chains created the worst horrors beneath this mountain. The truth settled heavily. The Moon Eater, the ancient experiments, the buried bloodlines. Ashborne's sins no longer remained hidden. Varro looked toward Draven slowly. And you support this? Draven's answer came without hesitation. I stand beside her. The bond mark across his hand ignited faintly as he reached for Ilara's fingers openly before the gathered armies. A public choice, not political. Personal. The Northern Alphas stared in silence, because kings did not publicly bind themselves to dangerous women unless absolutely certain. And suddenly, they understood the true danger. Not the Black Luna alone, but the fact the Alpha King would burn kingdoms for her if forced. Ronan stepped forward beside the throne then, voice sharp as steel. The mountain survived the night. His eyes swept across the rival houses. Ask yourselves carefully whether you wish to challenge the bloodline that woke it. The wind howled violently through the courtyard. Far below, wolves throughout the gathered armies began lowering themselves instinctively toward Ashborne Palace. Submission spread slowly, not forced, recognized. The mountain had chosen its rulers. Varro saw it too. His shoulders lowered slightly beneath the snow. Then finally, the rival Alpha bowed his head. Not deeply, but enough. The others followed. The war ended not through slaughter, but recognition. The Black Luna stood beside her king, while ancient moonfire glowed beneath Ashbourne's walls. And for the first time in centuries, the northern kingdoms knelt, not before fear, but balance reborn. Winter loosened its grip on Ashborne slowly after the war ended. The snowstorms faded first, then the fear, not all at once. Kingdoms did not heal that quickly. Too many graves still existed beneath the mountain. Too many lies had shaped too many generations. But for the first time in centuries, the northern kingdoms stopped burning shadow-marked children. That alone changed history. The truth buried beneath Ashborne spread across the territories before spring arrived. Some called it scandal. Others called it blasphemy. The old temples tried desperately to deny the existence of the Moon Eater and the ancient blood experiments beneath the mountain. But kingdoms could not unsee what they witnessed. The Black Luna standing beside the Alpha King while the mountain itself answered their bond. Fear still existed. Of course it did. Some villages whispered prayers when Ilara's name was spoken. Some noble houses still called her cursed behind locked doors. A few Western pacts abandoned their alliances entirely rather than accept shadow blood beside the throne. But none dared move openly against Ashborne anymore. Not after the mountain awakened. Not after wolves across the north instinctively bowed to the reborn bond. And not after Draven made one thing terrifyingly clear. He would choose Ilara over politics every single time. That frightened the kingdoms more than shadow magic ever had. Because power built on fear understood love poorly. Spring reached Ashborne in pale silver moonlight and melting snow across the cliffs. The palace slowly repaired itself around the wounds left by battle. Broken towers rebuilt. Moonfire cracks sealed beneath ancient stone. The lower abyss where the first creature had been imprisoned remained permanently closed, now beneath new black-silver seals. Not prison. Memorial. Ilara insisted on that. No more chains beneath the mountain. The old slave quarters were torn down entirely by royal decree before the thaw ended. Some nobles protested. Draven ignored them. Others protested when the royal records exposing the shadow bloodline experiments were opened publicly inside the archives. Ilara ignored them. Together they became something the court still struggled to understand. Not soft rulers. Not merciful fools. But rulers who no longer confused cruelty with strength. And slowly, Ashborne changed around them. The wolves changed too. Werewolves, once chained beneath the lower kennels, now roamed the mountain forests freely under royal protection. Many still answered instinctively to Alara when she crossed the cliffs at night beneath moonlight. The blind, one-eyed wolf survived. Of course he did. He followed her constantly now, like an enormous shadow with teeth. Ronan claimed the beast terrified half the palace guards. Alara secretly suspected the wolf enjoyed that. The shadow wolf itself never vanished completely either. It remained part of her now. Not prison, not curse, companion. Sometimes during storms, servants claimed they saw a massive black wolf prowling silently along Ashborne's highest towers beside the Luna, while silver moonfire glowed beneath the snow. The rumors spread quickly. Most were true. And Draven stopped wearing gloves. That became its own kind of legend. The king whose touch once carried death now crossed the palace halls, with his Luna's hand openly in his own. The scars along his palms never fully disappeared, but the curse beneath them transformed into something balanced instead of poisonous. The bond healed what fear had corrupted. Even Kadrin admitted that quietly one night after too much wine. The old counselor survived the winter, though age finally settled heavily across his shoulders now that secrets no longer held him upright. He spent most evenings rewriting Ashbourne's historical records personally, not to erase the kingdom's sins, to remember them properly. Truth, he once told Alara while staring into the palace firelight, is the only thing fear cannot survive forever. Seraphine vanished before spring. No execution, no public punishment. She simply disappeared from the capital. One snow-covered morning, after leaving behind her house crest and title. Some believe she fled west. Others claimed she joined the old moon priestesses in exile. Alara never searched for her. Some wounds no longer needed blood to end. The kingdoms expected a grand royal mating ceremony once peace returned. Ashborne refused. Instead, on the first full moon of spring, Draven brought Alara alone to the highest cliff overlooking the northern forests. No nobles, no priests, no politics, only moonlight and wind moving through silver pines below the mountain. The shadow wolf rested nearby, watching the stars, while distant werewolves howled somewhere deep in the valley. Draven stood beside Alara quietly for a long time before speaking. "When I first saw you in chains," he admitted softly, "I thought you were another problem the throne needed solved." Alara smiled faintly. "You hid that feeling very poorly." A rare laugh escaped him. Real this time. Warm enough to surprise them both. Then his expression softened again as he looked toward the moonlit forests below. "I spent years believing my blood destroyed everything it touched." His voice lowered. "Then you walked into the throne hall bleeding and furious at the world. And somehow I feared more for you than myself." The honesty in him still undid her. Even now. Especially now. Alara looked toward the mountain kingdom stretching beneath them. The place that once chained her. The place she nearly destroyed. The place she chose to save anyway. "I used to think survival meant becoming smaller," she whispered. "Quieter. Easier to overlook." Draven turned toward her fully. "And now?" Moonlight caught the silver gray in her eyes, while the bond mark beneath her skin glowed softly, like living shadow fire. "Now I think survival means refusing to become what fear expects." Silence settled gently between them. Peaceful. Earned. Draven stepped closer. "You already broke the cycle." The words tightened painfully in her chest. Because, perhaps she had. The Shadow Queen before her lost herself to grief and betrayal until kingdoms burned. But Alara had been given the same rage, and chose something different. Not because she was less dangerous, because she was loved before the hatred consumed her completely. The realization humbled her more than power ever could. Draven reached toward her slowly. Even after everything between them, he still moved like touching her mattered. Like she mattered. His fingers brushed her cheek softly beneath the moonlight. "My Luna," he murmured. Not title, not ownership. Choice. Alara closed the distance between them herself, this time. Their foreheads touched beneath the stars, while black and silver moonfire drifted gently through the night air around them. Below the cliffs, wolves across the northern forests lifted their heads toward Ashborne and howled. Not in fear. Recognition. The mountain answered. And for the first time in centuries, the sound carried no hunger. Only home.